Chapter 808. A hint of bitterness appeared on Mu Bing's face, but he did not refute anything. Instead, it was Mu Tianjiao who stood up with her chest out and cupped her fists towards the crowd. She smiled sweetly and decisively. Everyone has misunderstood my father. My father has been trying to stop me from entering the divine ruin realm, but my four links chamber of commerce is already swaying in the wind and rain. As my father's only daughter, how can I sit back and do nothing? For me to wait outside the ruins of God for a month without doing anything, I really can't do it. I hope everyone will work together with me to save my four links chamber of commerce from this crisis. Mu Tianjiao thanks everyone in advance. As she spoke, she bowed deeply. Everyone looked at each other and sighed in their hearts. It was Mu Tianjiao's misfortune to be born in the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, but the Four Links Chamber of Commerce with Mu Tianjiao was a great blessing. Yu Qianzhou could not help but let out a sigh in his heart. A daughter should be like Mu Tianjiao. She was much better than her father. A few miles away from the square, under a huge stone mountain, was a dark cave with a diameter of dozens of meters. White mist was rising from it, lingering outside the cave. A thick and majestic ancient aura was pulsating in and out, shocking everyone outside the cave. Then the white mist shrank and gathered inside the cave, blooming with a white stream of light and spinning. The hundreds of thousands of people outside stared intently at this scene until the white light in the cave stabilized. It's open. It's open. The crowd burst into excited cheers. The divine ruin realm had finally opened, and everyone's eyes were burning with excitement. Outside the cave were thousands of golden-robed men, each of them looking around vigilantly, keeping the hundreds of thousands of people away from the cave entrance. The stone mountain was also filled with thousands of golden-robed men watching below. The external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace, Wuxia, stood behind the thousands of golden-robed men, quietly standing beside the cave entrance with his hands behind his back. His cold gaze swept over the hundreds of thousands of people from the various sects and chambers of commerce. He was the commander who had helped Mu Tianjiao out of trouble before. At this moment, the hundreds of thousands of people all stared at the side of the mountain. They saw a team of 100 golden-robed men walking neatly from the side. They lined up in front of Wu Xiong and knelt on one knee saying, "Greetings, Commander." Wu Xiong nodded slightly and said indifferently, "Let's begin." The 100 people all stood up. The leader waved his hand at them and signaled for them to set off. He took the lead and flew into the swirling white light in the cave. The others also followed him without hesitation. Then a person walked out from behind Wu Xiong and waved his arm forward. The thousands of golden-robed men immediately changed their formation, forming of one group of 100, of each group of 100, and immediately separated dozens of paths. The hundreds of thousands of people gathered outside immediately surged and slowly moved forward. The Immortal of the hundreds of thousands of people had. For a time, people from the various sects and merchant guilds could be seen passing through the golden-robed guards and rushing into the cave. As for the situation behind the cave, no one knew. However, everyone could imagine how cruel the bloody competition was, because every time the divine ruin realm opened, out of the hundreds of thousands of people who entered, less than 100,000 would return. Some sects and chambers of commerce would send 30 disciples in, but only 1 or 2 would come back alive. Some unlucky ones might not even make it back alive. That would be a huge loss. But those disciples who could come back alive and make great contributions to the sect would not have to worry about living for the rest of their lives. Then again, if there was a heavy reward, there would definitely be brave men. If there was no heavy reward, who would risk their lives? After more than half a day, the hundreds of thousands of people had finally entered. Instead, tens of thousands of elders from various sects had gathered in the sky. They were all nervously staring at the scene below. They would be waiting here for a month, and their respective stalls would be their lodgings. 1 month later, whether the sect would be happy or sad would depend on whether their disciples lived up to expectations. Those who lived up to expectations would be able to display many rare items in their own stalls to sell, while the unlucky ones would either have to spend money to buy things or pack up and leave. The Four Links Chamber of Commerce was the last to arrive. When the people from the various sects and chambers of commerce had all left, they walked up to the golden-robed guards for inspection. Many people in the sky felt strange looking at this group of people. There were only 31 people in total, and 2 of them clearly had cultivation that exceeded the limit. while the last one's cultivation couldn't be seen through. Excluding these 3 people, there were only 28 people participating. For this kind of thing, everyone hoped that the more people that went in, the better it would be. Perhaps the extra person that came out would be able to collect precious items worth hundreds of millions or even hundreds of billions of divine-grade spirit stones. At the very least, the more people that went in, the more likely there would be one more person that would come back alive and at least bring something out. No one had ever seen such a situation before, and they couldn't figure out what the Four Links Chamber of Commerce was up to. Some people who had dealings with the Four Links Chamber of Commerce knew the predicament they were in, shaking their heads and sighing. As for Qi Fengxing, who had a deep understanding of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, he was sneering at the side. Wan Ling and the 3 elders exchanged a glance, noticing that Yu Qianzhou was standing at the end of the group, walking at the back of the group in a well-behaved manner. However, his head kept darting left and right as if he was curious about everything. It was not easy for someone like him to be able to stand at the end of a group of several 100,000 people. Being the only one among several 100,000 people was quite eye-catching. However, the most eye-catching thing was yet to come. 2 golden-robed guards suddenly raised their hands and shouted, "Stop right there. You're not allowed to go in," cutting off Yu Qianzhou's little tail from the outside. Everyone's gazes were fixed on him. Yu Qianzhou was isolated outside, dumbfounded as he looked around. Facing the group of golden-robed guards that were glaring at him like tigers watching their prey, he swallowed hard and said, "Why if they can go in, why can't I go in?" One of the golden-robed guards snorted coldly, "There's no why. Leave now." Mu Bing hurried over with Nan Tianlong, bowing and explaining, "You may have misunderstood. His cultivation is only at the soul formation stage. He's only like this because he took an immortal pill that conceals his cultivation. That's your business. There's no need to explain it to me." The golden-robed guard shouted, "Leave now or you'll be killed." Mu Bing couldn't hold back after hearing such harsh words. Mu Tianjiao, who had already passed the inspection, quickly ran back. She bowed to the golden-robed guard and begged, "Big brother, please do me a favor. He really is only at the soul formation stage. You can check him." Commander Wuxia, who was standing at the entrance of the cave, had no interest in this kind of thing. His subordinates naturally had their reasons for doing this, but when his gaze landed on Mu Tianjiao, he paused slightly. In a flash, he teleported to their side and asked indifferently, "What's going on?" After the group of people bowed, both sides explained the reason. Wu Xiong glanced at the small group of people and was somewhat curious. He stared at Mu Tianjiao and asked, "Why are there fewer people?" Mu Tianjiao immediately bowed and said, "Reporting to Commander, our Chamber of Commerce is in a difficult time. We really can't gather enough people. Other than my daughter, they were all recruited by our Chamber of Commerce. We're already very lucky to be able to recruit so many people." Wu Xiong had been in the celestial world for so many years, so of course he knew about ups and downs. He could roughly guess what was going on. He asked indifferently, "You want to enter the divine ruin realm yourself?" "Yes." Mu Tianjiao replied respectfully. "We really don't have enough people." Wu Xiong didn't ask any more questions. He made an exception and put his hand on Yu Qianzhou's shoulder. He discovered that Yu Qianzhou's body was indeed filled with white true essence, not golden celestial essence. He didn't say the result himself. He said indifferently to the 2 guards, "Check his cultivation." "Yes." The 2 guards responded and immediately put a hand on Yu Qianzhou's shoulder. Then they withdrew their hands and replied, "Late-stage soul formation cultivation." Wu Xiong nodded and said, "Late-stage soul formation cultivation entering the divine ruin realm isn't against the rules, right?" One of them immediately reported, "Since it's been confirmed, it's not against the rules." Without another word, Wu Xiong waved his hand and said, "Let them pass." At the same time, he disappeared in a flash, not even giving Mu Tianjiao and the others a chance to thank him. After some twists and turns, under Mu Tianjiao's lead, the group of 28 people finally entered the divine ruin realm. Wan Ling and the 3 elders looked at each other speechlessly after witnessing this scene. They didn't expect that Yu Qianzhou had really taken an immortal pill to conceal his cultivation. What they didn't expect even more was that Yu Qianzhou would actually enter such a dangerous place like the divine ruin realm. The mystery of buying 100 sets of illustrations made them even more confused. Could it be to bring them into the divine ruin realm for comparison? But they didn't even have 30 people, so what did they need 100 sets for? As soon as Yu Qianchou and the others entered the circling white light, they immediately felt as if they were in a starry sky. There were colorful streams of light flying around them, and there was a huge suction force in front of them that made them involuntarily pass through. In just a few moments, everyone felt their eyes light up. A huge force spat them out from the darkness of the flowing light. As soon as they stood firm, they immediately found that the exit was also a cave, and there was also a rotating white light behind them. This was also the entrance to go back. After a month, it would automatically disappear and they could go back at any time within a month. However, once they went out, they would lose the chance to come back. The people of the Immortal Palace would not let them in again. However, no one would go back before the time limit was up. The consequences of going out midway were very serious. The sects would never be lenient to people who were afraid of death and brought shame to their sections. Of course, if they brought back a great treasure, that was another matter. Because that was called protecting a treasure meritorious. Everyone had already taken out their own treasures and walked out vigilantly. Yu Qianchou walked out empty-handed. His treasures could appear at any time, so it was easier to use them empty-handed. As soon as everyone walked out of the cave, they were immediately shocked. What they saw was a bloody scene of corpses strewn all over the ground. Chapter 809. As far as the eye could see, everything was dark and gloomy, as if it was raining and the sun couldn't be seen. The naked eye couldn't see very far, only a few hundred meters away. However, within this area, there were broken limbs and intestines spilling out. The blood on the ground had yet to coagulate and was still flowing slowly. It was obvious that the fierce battle was about to end. Countless people had died with their eyes wide open. Roughly estimating, thousands of people had died within this area of a few hundred meters. No wonder it was said that the fight for treasures was the most intense when they first entered. Often, because of the appearance of a single immortal herb, everyone would gather and fight over it. The hazy mist was obviously condensed from spiritual energy. Just breathing it in was enough to refresh one's mind, but the thick smell of blood in the air made it hard for people to breathe freely. The group was glad that they were the last to enter. Although they might have lost the chance to obtain the precious treasure, they had avoided heavy casualties. Everyone here had seen the world, and death was a common occurrence. The tragic scene in front of them shocked them, but there was nothing to be afraid of. Mu Tianjiao's beautiful hair had long been tied into a tight knot. In one hand she held a small silver-white shield engraved with various patterns of flowers. In the other she held a sword. Judging from the gleaming luster on the sword, they were no ordinary items. It's best that we don't split up. However, in case we get separated by an accident, everyone must remember the way back. After Mu Tianjiao's sincere explanation, a resolute expression flashed across her face as she warned, "But I'll say the ugly words first. According to the previous agreement, if you withdraw without obtaining any valuable treasures, I, Si Tong, will not pay a single spirit stone." No one said anything. Most of them were vigilant of their surroundings. Yu Qianchou tilted his head and rummaged through a pile of jade archives and illustrations from his storage pouch. After arranging them in a convenient order, he put them back into his storage pouch. He kept 2 of the immortal herbs in his hand, ready to compare them with the real thing. He had no choice. Unlike everyone else, they were all natives of the immortal realm. Even if they hadn't seen many things before, they had at least heard of them. With one look they could tell what they should pick and what they shouldn't. However, when they saw that he didn't take out any transcendent artifacts, but instead took out 2 jade archives, they became curious. Only Tao Zhong turned his head to the side speechlessly. "You're a second-generation rich kid. What are you doing here? Is this a place for you to play?" Mu Tianjiao asked suspiciously. "Yu Qianchou, don't you have any Dharma treasures?" Yu Qianchou raised his head and let out an ah. When he came back to his senses, he casually took out a flying sword from his sleeve. With a flash of cold light, it went back into his sleeve. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They were all interested in his sleeve and couldn't help but take a few more glances. Seeing that he was prepared, Mu Tianjiao nodded slightly, waved the shield in her hand and said, "Let's go." The group flew up lightly, passing by the bloody corpses, not daring to fly too high. After flying out of this wretched land of intense slaughter, he landed on the ground and walked again. Because everyone was here to look for treasures, the line of sight here was not good. If they flew too high, they would definitely miss something. While everyone was vigilant of their surroundings, they were also searching for something. Yu Qianchou could be said to be the most proactive one. He held 2 jade archives in his hands, his eyes darting around as he ran at the very front. If he found any suspicious plants, he would immediately take out the jade archives and quickly compare them. The others could not understand what he was doing, but Mu Tianjiao was a little touched by his initiative. Tao Zhong was the only one who scolded him in his heart. A second-generation rich kid. Their surroundings were always covered in fog formed by dense spiritual energy. If they were to cultivate here, they might even be able to save on spirit stones. Yu Qianzhou was even wondering if he should bring the Utopia army here for training. Perhaps it was because they were shrouded in spirit fog for a long period of time and never saw sunlight, but the plants in the ruins of God looked a little strange. They were mostly different from the plants commonly seen outside. This brought great trouble to Yu Qianzhou's search. He could barely walk far, and he would have to stop for a moment when he encountered a strange plant. However, the benefits it brought were also great. It did not take long for him to be able to eliminate some things without looking at the jade archives. The entire terrain of the ruins of God seemed to be made up of hills. Tall mountains were rarely seen, perhaps because they had not yet ventured deep into the ruins. It was also probably related to the lack of sunlight. There were very few tall trees in the surroundings. This was a good thing for the treasure hunters as they did not have as much cover. Along the way, they occasionally saw traces of fighting. There were ferocious beasts that had been killed, as well as the corpses of those who had been killed in battle. The storage bags and storage bracelets on their bodies were nowhere to be seen. It was obvious that they had been taken by their opponents. After hundreds of thousands of people swept through the area, it was indeed very safe. Even the wild beasts were probably scared out of their wits, let alone the ferocious beasts. Although Yu Qianzhou and the others were the last to enter, they did not come out empty-handed. They found quite a number of immortal herbs along the way. Although they were not very valuable, they would pick them as long as they passed by. Because the reward given by the four-way sect was 1/10 of the estimated value of the items they found, every item they collected was equivalent to an additional reward. This made Yu Qianzhou admire Mu Tianjiao's methods. She made everyone feel like they were shareholders in his previous life, working hard with the mentality that the more they earned, the more they would get. However, Yu Qianzhou was not interested in this small amount of money. He couldn't even be bothered to look at the low-grade jade archives, with the highest value being 1 divine-grade spirit stone. In his hand were mid-grade and high-grade jade archives with the lowest value of 1 divine-grade spirit stone, with the highest value reaching hundreds of billions of divine-grade spirit stones. Currently, everyone was still in the outer region of the ruins of God. It would be very difficult for Huang Xiaolong to find mid-grade and high-grade immortal herbs. Everyone had more or less harvested their harvest, but he did not even touch a single stalk. Not to mention Mu Tianjiao, even everyone else was a little unhappy. Because once they went out, he, Yu Qianzhou, would have to take a share of everyone's hard-earned harvest. How could he just split the money and not do any work? Who knew that before everyone could complain, Yu Qianzhou would be the first to do so? He who was walking at the front suddenly stopped, turning around and shouting at the crowd, following behind others like, "This is not a solution, There really isn't anything valuable here. Even if there was, it would have been swept clean by the hundreds of thousands of people ahead of us. Why don't we just fly forward, go deeper inside and make a fortune? What do you guys think?" Everyone exchanged a look, hesitating. Going deeper inside was indeed possible, but there were definitely too many people here. Even if they came across something good, they would have to fight to snatch it. The risk was too high. If they dragged on for another day or two, many people would die and the danger would be greatly reduced. At that time, it wouldn't be too late to plot again. Mu Tianjiao pondered in silence. In truth, her thoughts were more or less the same as everyone else. She indeed wanted to drag on for another day or two. Seeing that no one spoke, Yu Qianzhou waved his arm, shouting, "What's there to be afraid of? The timid will starve to death, the bold will die from overeating. It's impossible to make a fortune without taking risks. Everyone be straightforward, are we going or not?" Someone couldn't stand it, mistaking him for someone slacking off and mocking, "Since you don't work and keep wandering around, why don't you go deeper and explore the situation first?" Mu Tianjiao still wanted to stop them, telling everyone not to cause trouble that was detrimental to unity. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianzhou slapped his thigh and laughed. "Good idea, you guys take your time to search. I'll go scout out the situation first, then come back to look for you guys. It's settled then." With that said, he disappeared into the spirit fog with a whoosh. Mu Tianjiao wanted to stop him, but she didn't have time. The group of people were speechless. realizing that this guy was really bold, actually daring to go in alone. Yu Qianzhou flew inside quickly with a face full of excitement. He had long wanted to leave the group and act alone. Otherwise, if he encountered something good, it would be inconvenient to take it for himself, and if he was forced to kill his own people to snatch the treasure, how embarrassing would that be? Just as he was fantasizing that he had picked up a treasure worth hundreds of billions, suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air, and dozens of streams of light formed a matrix, sealing off his path forward and retreat, rapidly shooting towards him. If it was someone else who encountered this, they would probably be in danger because they had lost the space to teleport through and dodge. F***ck. You're courting death. Yu Qianzhou was instantly enraged. He hadn't found anyone to fight since he came in, but someone actually ambushed him. It was really intolerable. With a wave of his arms, he used the metal incantation, and in an instant, dozens of flying swords that attacked him exploded into silver powder with a hum. At the same time that he attacked, Yu Qianzhou quickly passed through the silver powder that filled the air and shot in the direction of the attack. Along the way, he was afraid that the person who ambushed him would escape, so he disappeared with a teleport, directly appearing in the forest below. The 30 people lying in ambush in the forest were prepared to secretly attack and steal the treasure. Before entering the Divine Ruin Realm, they had already secretly trained in a group attack in the sect for a long time. This was the first time that they had found someone alone and the first time they attacked as a group. Who knew that after the flying swords were released, they would suddenly lose contact with everyone. The 30 people were looking at each other in dismay when they suddenly realized that there was one more person among them, and they were immediately shocked. Before they could react, the other party had already shaken his arms and shouted angrily, "Star-absorbing great technique." Everyone only saw a burst of white smoke in front of them and they instantly lost consciousness. F***ck. I am number 1 in the world below the Immortal realm. How dare you sneak attack me? You must be tired of living. Yu Qianzhou cursed and crushed a skeleton, taking the storage bags from the waists of the 30 skeletons into his hands. Carrying a large pile of storage bags, his mood immediately became better. He leaned against a tree and happily checked the storage bags one by one, but the more he looked, the darker his face became. He didn't find anything valuable. After confiscating all the storage bags, he rushed out of the forest with a whoosh. He didn't know which sect the 30 skeletons on the ground belonged to, but they were all destroyed in the blink of an eye. He didn't know how the elders of the sect who were waiting outside the divine ruins would react when they found out, and he didn't know how the sect who had secretly trained them in a joint attack would react when they found out. Chapter 8:10. To Yu Qianzhou, killing these people did not burden him in the slightest. Entering this place to fight and kill was a matter of life and death. Success or failure was up to the heavens. Moreover, these people were the ones who made the first move. He had not flown far from the place where he had killed people when he faintly heard the sounds of an intense battle. It sounded like a group of people were fighting. Yu Qianzhou immediately slowed down and arrived outside a valley. He quietly floated close to the ground and hid behind a large boulder. He peeked his head out to take a look. By the time he saw what was happening, the intense battle was almost over. He saw with his own eyes one of the people being dismembered by a group of swords. There were other corpses scattered all over the valley. Another surrounded gray-robed man suddenly summoned something from his storage bangle. He grabbed it in his hand and shouted angrily, "Stop, or I'll destroy it." The dozen or so blue-robed men surrounding him immediately hesitated. Their flying swords hovered in the air, glaring at the gray-robed man. However, none of them dared to make another move. After exchanging glances, one of them stepped forward and said with a cold smile, "Hand it over and I promise to let you live." "Do you think I'll believe your bullshit?" the gray-robed man said with a face full of grief and indignation. The leader of the blue-robed men scoffed, "What do you want then? If you destroy the thing, you'll still die. Hand it over and I promise to let you go." The gray-robed man shook his head in grief and indignation. He knew full well what would happen to him if he handed over the thing. However, as luck would have it, he happened to see a head peeping from behind a large boulder outside the valley. Needless to say, it was Yu Qianzhou. The gray-robed man immediately shouted at Yu Qianzhou, "Brother, if you can save my life, I'm willing to give you 1 yuan of the Tri-Element's divine fruit." "Damn it! Don't drag me down with you, you bastard." Yu Qianzhou cursed under his breath and immediately retracted his head. However, he seemed to have heard the name tri-elements divine fruit, somewhere before. He immediately took out the jade archive and checked it. The dozen or so blue-robed men looked over but saw no one. The leader immediately laughed and said, "Do you think we're 3-year-olds? You're still trying to create a diversion at this point? I advise you to obediently hand over the item, and I promise to let you go." However, the gray-clothed man was unwilling to give up. He shouted again, "Brother, do you think it's too little? All right, as long as you can save my life, I'm willing to give you 2 essences of the 3 elements immortal fruit. If you can help me kill all of them and take revenge, I can give you all of the 3 elements immortal fruits." Yu Qianzhou, who was hiding behind the boulder, turned a deaf ear to him. He was waving his fists excitedly in the air. He had finally found the description of the 3 elements immortal fruit in the intermediate level illustrated handbook. This 3 elements immortal fruit was not simple. It had miraculous effects, and was one of the 3 main ingredients of the Immortal Ascension Pill. What was the Immortal Ascension Pill? When one's cultivation base reached the peak of late divine transformation stage, consuming this immortal pill would allow one's cultivation base to rise to early minor immortal stage. The Immortal Ascension Pill was just right for Yu Qianzhou. He was at the peak of the soul-severing final stage and was just a step away from breaking through to the minor immortal early stage. Don't underestimate this one step. Even in the immortal world, there were many people who couldn't take this step. Of course, reaching the early minor immortal stage didn't mean that one could forge an immortal physique. But as long as one's cultivation reached this level, forging an immortal physique wasn't a difficult task for people in the immortal world. All they needed to do was spend some money to borrow the passage from the Immortal Palace. Any one of the 72 passages from the immortal world to the mortal world would do. Even though the Immortal Ascension Pill was nothing to most cultivators in the immortal world, it was a priceless treasure for those who were stuck in the soul-severing stage for their entire lives. Especially those rich and powerful families in the immortal world, they would spend large sums of money to purchase it. One had to know that although the lifespan of a soul-severing cultivator was long, it wasn't immortality. Once one stepped into the immortal realm and forged an immortal physique, one would be able to live forever. Just imagine how tempting this was. Hence, the price of the Immortal Ascension Pill had always been high in the immortal world. One Immortal Ascension Pill could be sold for 1 billion divine-grade spirit stones, and it could be even higher. As for the main ingredient, the 3 elements immortal fruit, even if it wasn't refined into an immortal pill, it could still be sold for 300 million divine-grade spirit stones. How could Yu Qianzhou not be excited? The gray-robed man raising the price once again immediately attracted the attention of the group of blue-robed men. The leader of the group raised his chin at his fellow disciple, then turned to look at him in disappointment. The latter immediately dashed over. Hiding behind a boulder, Yu Qianzhou had just put away the jade archive and made up his mind to snatch the treasure when he raised his head and saw a blue-robed man appear in front of him. Before he could react, the flying sword in the blue-robed man's hand was already flying towards him. With a wave of his left hand, Yu Qianzhou smashed the flying sword into dust. His right hand formed a claw as he used the absorbing star's great art. The instant white smoke rose from the blue-robed man's body. Huang Xiaolong had already rushed over and smashed the blue-robed man into pieces. As the white smoke dissipated, Yu Qianzhou appeared. Standing at the valley's exit, he slowly turned around to face the group of blue-robed men. Such a shocking entrance method immediately shocked the group of blue-clothed people. They didn't see the scene of Yu Qianzhou smashing the flying sword behind the rock, but they saw the scene of their fellow disciple being smashed into pieces by the opponent's palm. His fellow disciple didn't even have the time to scream before he died. The group of blue-robed men looked at Yu Qianzhou's cultivation, but none of them could see through it. They exchanged looks and saw the fear in each other's eyes. The leader of the group even exclaimed, "You're an immortal expert, how did you enter the divine ruin realm?" Yu Qianzhou wanted this kind of shocking effect. Although the absorbing star's great art was powerful, he did not want to casually show it in front of outsiders. This was because this move was a trump card no matter where he went. It had to be used conservatively, so he still used it to confuse them. "You've got some guts. I didn't want to interfere in your matters, but you actually dared to attack me first. You're really tired of living." Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly as he slowly walked into the valley. The gray-robed man was overjoyed. He looked around, and while the others were not paying attention, he teleported behind Yu Qianzhou to hide. At this moment the leader of the blue-robed men shouted, "Run!" He was the first to teleport far away into the air and then quickly flew away. The others also ran away at almost the same time. Yu Qianzhou was startled. The distance was a little far. He wanted to get closer and use his qi to lock onto them, then use the absorbing star's great art to finish them all off and strive to leave no one alive. Who would have thought that the other party would run away without even thinking? He had thought that his shocking entrance would scare them into not daring to move, but they still ran away. He was only at the soul formation stage, so it was impossible for him to catch up to them one by one. "Thank you for saving my life, senior." The gray-robed man's voice sounded from behind him. Yu Qianzhou turned around and glared at him coldly. He was a little displeased. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of damaging the treasures in this guy's hands, he would have killed him a long time ago. The gray-robed man shuddered in the face of his cold gaze, and he offered the three-element divine fruits with both hands. "In order to thank Senior for saving my life, I am willing to offer all of the three-element divine fruits to you, Senior." On the tip of a foot-long dark green sawtooth grass, 3 quail egg-sized bright red fruits were growing. The fruits were faintly glowing with a thin layer of red light. A strange fragrance that could make one's heart melt slowly drifted out from the hands of the man in gray. Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. It was exactly the same as what was recorded in the handbook. He reached out to grab it, took a look and sniffed it before stuffing it into his storage pouch. He then looked at the gray-robed man who didn't dare to stand up straight and asked, "You wouldn't give it to them even if you died, so why are you giving it to me?" The gray-robed man said respectfully, "They killed my fellow sect brothers, so I naturally can't give it to them. Besides, even if I give it to them, they won't let me go. Senior saved my life, so I am willing to give the treasures to Senior." He only said this to save his life. Otherwise, who would be willing to give up their treasures? Yu Qianzhou was naturally aware of this. He nodded and asked, "Which sect are you from?" The gray-robed man replied honestly, "Junior is Shui Mingqing, a disciple of the Skyward Palace." The Skyward Palace? Yu Qianzhou was stunned. The Skyward Palace, the #1 alchemy sect in the celestial realm? That's right. Shui Mingqing raised his head and said, "Could it be that Senior knows the elders of my sect?" Yu Qianzhou shook his head, but he put on a smiling expression and asked, "Since you're a disciple of the Skyward Palace, I'm sure you know a lot of alchemy recipes for refining immortal pills. For example, using this 3 elements immortal fruit to refine the Immortal Ascension pill." Although his expression became amiable, Shui Mingqing felt a chill down his spine. It was as if he had seen a dagger hidden in a smile. He immediately waved his hand and said, "Junior is just an external affairs disciple. Our sect's disciples haven't reached the celestial realm, so they don't have the chance to come into contact with alchemy. So Junior doesn't know any alchemy recipes." Yu Qianzhou snorted and said with a cold smile, "You're clearly lying to me. As a disciple of the Skyward Palace, how can you not know anything about alchemy?" Shui Mingqing hurriedly explained, "Senior may not know this, but before the cultivation of our Skyward Palace's disciples reaches the celestial realm, apart from cultivation, the main thing is to learn how to recognize various kinds of immortal herbs and be familiar with the medicinal properties of various immortal herbs and pills. Only after reaching the celestial realm will they have the opportunity to come into contact with the basic alchemy methods of refining immortal pills. As their cultivation increases, it's possible to come into contact with higher-level alchemy recipes. This rule of our sect is not a secret in the celestial realm and many people know about it. Senior way." He didn't finish his sentence, but Yu Qianzhou was not a fool. Naturally, he knew what he wanted to say, but now he believed that what he said was true. After a pause, his eyebrows suddenly moved as if he remembered something. He coughed and said, "Since you said you're familiar with the medicinal properties of various kinds of immortal herbs and pills, I'd like to test you. Do you know about the limit-breaking pill?" "Yes." Shui Mingqing replied confidently, "The limit-breaking pill is transparent white. Ordinary cultivators with spirit stones can increase their cultivation by 1 level every time they take one, and they can't increase anymore when they reach the end of the tribulation passing stage. There are actually 2 other colors of the limit-breaking pill, one is purple and the other is red. Actually, both of them are poisonous pills." Chapter 8:11. Shui Mingqing spoke tirelessly, clearly explaining the pros and cons of the limit-breaking pill. His explanation was even clearer than Yu Qianzhou's understanding from the pill formula Jade archive. He even thoroughly analyzed the medicinal principles of the limit-breaking pill. This greatly amazed Yu Qianzhou. The Skyward Palace was indeed worthy of being the leader of the industry in the immortal realm. It had already formed a fairly complete cultivation system. Its disciples had already laid a solid foundation before they even came into contact with alchemy. Once they officially started in the future, they would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. Sure enough, the methods accumulated over the years were not something that the cultivation sects in the mortal world could compare with. Then let me test you again. Is there any way to get rid of the toxins that have seeped into the body after taking the limit-breaking pill? Yu Qianzhou asked with a smile, his hands behind his back. He really did have the air of an old pedant testing his students. Shui Mingqing's face was filled with doubt. He did not know why this senior would ask such a simple question. Even if these questions were not known to everyone in the immortal realm, they were not secrets, were they? Yu Qianzhou urged with a smile. It doesn't matter. Don't worry and say it boldly. Shui Mingqing paused for a moment, then continued to reply respectfully. The toxins of the real limit-breaking pill are relatively mild. Generally, cultivators can rely on their own cultivation to self-regulate and eliminate the toxins within a month. But the limit-breaking pill is different. It is very harmful to the cultivator's body. The more they take, the more toxins will seep into their limbs, bones, and meridians. In severe cases, they will die suddenly, but in light cases, their cultivation will not progress. In fact, many people in the immortal realm use the limit-breaking pill to forcibly increase their cultivation. But for the famous sects, this method of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm is generally not used. At first glance, it can quickly form a batch of power in a short period of time. But in the long run, even if the golden marrow cleansing pill is used to get rid of the toxins in the body, it will also cause congenital damage to the meridians in the limbs and bones, resulting in acquired deficiencies. This will bring great confusion to future cultivation. Since ancient times, almost none of the cultivators who have taken the limit-breaking pill have been able to increase their cultivation above the great immortal realm, unless there is another elixir to remedy it. So for the famous sects, they generally do not use methods like spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm like the limit-breaking pill, because for them they care more about long-term benefits. Only when there are more strong cultivators in the sect can the benefits of the sect last longer. That makes sense. Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and asked, the marrow-cleansing golden pill you mentioned is the thing that can remove the poison from the limit-breaking pill, right? Exactly. Shui Mingqing couldn't help but ask, with Senior's cultivation, you shouldn't need the marrow-washing golden pill, right? Senior, do you have someone who has taken the limit-breaking pill? Smart. To think that you would be able to guess that. Yu Qianzhou laughed out. And pill? And is it expensive? Shui Mingqing really wanted to take a closer look at what kind of person this person was. Why did he keep asking this question that everyone knew about? However, he did not dare to be presumptuous. After all, with this person's cultivation base, he could kill Shui Mingqing at any time. Thus, without any complaints, he replied obediently, actually, the demand is still very high because there are many people who have used pills similar to the restriction-breaking pill. However, in terms of unit price, whether it was high or not depended on who it was for. On average, each marrow-cleansing golden marrow pellet cost around 2,000 divine-grade spirit stones. It was a huge sum to the average person, but it was nothing to the big sects and families. In fact, the golden marrow cleansing pellets cost price wasn't high at all. The main reason why it could be sold for 2,000 divine-grade spirit stones was because of the high demand, not to mention that immortal herbs had a certain growth cycle. No matter how common an immortal herb was, it couldn't be as common as weeds. It wasn't worth it to use other treasures to grow it. This explanation was very detailed. Yu Qianzhou looked at the other person in admiration, but he was calculating in his heart. There were close to 10,000 people in Utopia's army. Including some people who did odd jobs, there were more than 10,000 people. These were all his subordinates and he could not leave them alone. Moreover, when he came to the immortal world to conquer the world, it was more reassuring to use his own people. After all, he had spent a lot of effort to train them day by day. 10,000 marrow-cleansing golden marrow pellets were only 20 million divine-grade spirit stones. He could still afford this amount of money. Even if he could not afford it, he had to think of a way to do so. From the time he sat on the flying shuttle to look at the vast immortal world, to the gathering of heroes outside the ruins of God, his blood was already boiling. A very grand idea was born in his heart. It was too boring for those cultivators in the cultivation world to fight over such a small territory in the human world. As the #1 expert in the human world, he had the responsibility and obligation to bring everyone out to see the world. If everyone had the ability to follow my orders, then follow me to the immortal world to fight for it. From that moment on, he had the intention to use Utopia as the core and establish the cultivation world in the human world as his headquarters. Then he would bring everyone to the immortal world to develop. He believed that those experts who were famous in the human world were not petty people. Once they went to the immortal world and saw the world, they would not be interested in the benefits of the human world. Not to mention forging an immortal body, just the spirit stones here could be counted as divine grade. Who would still want to disturb the secular world? In this way, his wish to separate the cultivation world from the secular world would naturally come true. Yu Qianzhou pondered for a moment and suddenly asked, "Just now you said that there are pills similar to the limit-breaking pill. Then, are there pills that can raise one's cultivation from the tribulation passing stage to the soul formation late stage?" "Yes," Shui Mingqing said with certainty. "It is said that as long as the main ingredient for refining the limit-breaking pill remains the same and a few other immortal herbs are added, it can be refined into the limit-breaking pill. But the side effect of this pill is that the toxicity is too strong. Once you break through to the soul formation late stage and don't take the marrow-cleansing golden pill in time, you will immediately die. Even so, you must break through to the small immortal stage within 3 months and forge an immortal body. Otherwise, your body will gradually weaken and you will quickly age and die within 3 months." "The toxicity is so strong?" Yu Qianzhou was shocked and asked, "Are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" Shui Mingqing raised his head and looked at him seriously and said, "Senior, you can ask others. There should be many people in the immortal world who know about this. But generally no one will take the limit-breaking pill. It should be known that it is impossible to break through from the soul formation late stage to the small immortal stage within 3 months. Only those who have the immortal ascension pill would dare to do so. But one immortal ascension pill is worth 1 billion divine grade spirit stones. It is not a small amount for ordinary sections. Using this method to raise one's cultivation level is simply using a huge amount of spirit stones. Not many people can afford it. Plus, using the limit-breaking pill to raise one's cultivation level has a huge impact on the future, so very few people use it." Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Putting everything else aside, one immortal ascension pill was worth 1 billion divine grade spirit stones. If he raised the cultivation level of all the people in Utopia to the small immortal stage, it would be an astronomical figure. Even the wealthy immortal palace would not be able to afford it. After a moment of shock, he calmed down. As long as he could find the various immortal herbs to refine the pill in the ruins of God, with the help of the purple chaos in Utopia, it would not be a problem to cultivate a large number of immortal herbs. The real problem was in the refining. With the pill refining recipe he could make a living in the mortal world, but it was obviously not good enough in the immortal world. But then again, as long as he could control a large number of rare immortal herbs, he would not have to worry about not being able to earn money in the immortal world. At the same time, he would not have to spend so much money. The most important problem now was to find the rare immortal herbs to cultivate and then the problem of refining. As for finding rare spirit herbs, he had planned to do so before entering the ruins of God, but to find someone to refine the pill? Yu Qianzhou pinched his chin and looked at Shui Mingqing greedily. He had already set his sights on the #1 alchemist sect in the immortal world, Skyward Palace. Looking at the clothes of the corpses scattered in the valley, Yu Qianzhou sighed meaningfully. "It seems that among the 30 people from Skyward Palace who came in, you are the only one who is lucky enough to be alive. What are your plans for the future?" Shui Mingqing's face darkened when he heard this. He slowly shook his head and said, "If I can find a valuable treasure and return, it will be a great contribution. If I go back empty-handed, I'm afraid my cultivation will come to an end." Yu Qianzhou suddenly chuckled and said, "Even if you have a valuable treasure in your hands, do you think you can leave the ruins of God by yourself? I'm afraid there are already people lying in ambush at the exit of the ruins of God, waiting for a lone person like you to walk right into the trap." Shui Mingqing was immediately stunned on the spot. After a moment of absent-mindedness, he suddenly raised his head and bowed. Senior's cultivation is profound. Please show me a way out. He was not stupid. After he reacted, he immediately guessed that Xianxia must have a purpose for saying this. Otherwise, with the other party's cultivation, there was no need for him to pay attention to him. Talking to smart people is really enjoyable. You understand with just a hint. Xianxia scanned the entire valley and said slowly, I won't hide it from you. After we go out, I will have to deal with your sect. When the time comes, you can introduce me to them. Secondly, you will follow me for this month. When we go out together a month later, I will give you a rare treasure that you can take out so that you can explain to your sect. Of course, during this month, you will also have to display your specialty and help me lead the team to find all kinds of rare immortal herbs. What do you think? Shui Mingqing was overjoyed. With the other party's ability, it should not be a problem to protect him. Moreover, there was no need for the other party to lie to him. He was such a burden in this dangerous area. He immediately bowed and said, Junior will follow Senior's arrangements. But as he said this, he looked around and was stunned. Senior wants me to lead the team? May I know where Senior's men are? Chapter 8:12. Xianxia laughed and walked over to pat him on the shoulder. He seemed to have found the feeling when Immortal Crocodile patted him. Then he said, Don't worry, it won't be long before a large number of experts will come to command you. I guarantee that you'll have a good time in the Divine Ruin Realm. Shui Mingqing was shocked by his pat and nodded with an awkward smile. I'll follow Senior's arrangements, Senior's arrangements. Xianxia looked around and pointed to the valley. Find a place to hide in this valley first. Wait for me for a day or two. I'll come find you then. A day or two. Shui Mingqing immediately said with a bitter face, Senior, there are no good places to hide in this valley. I'm afraid I won't be able to hold on for a day or two before I'm discovered. Xianxia was startled. He waved his hand and said, It's okay, I'll give you a safe place to hide. Just as he waved his hand, the ground surged and the two of them went straight underground. Shui Mingqing looked around in surprise and said blithely, Earth manipulation technique. The layer of soil above their heads healed and the light disappeared instantly. The two of them were still sinking until they reached a depth of about 100 meters underground. Xianxia learned from Huang Tian that day and scattered a large pile of fluorite. The surrounding layer of soil was inlaid with fluorite and retreated. In a short while, a spacious underground room was formed with tables and chairs. Although Shui Mingqing knew of the earth manipulation technique, it was still the first time he witnessed such a magical scene. His eyes couldn't help but shine as he cupped his hands and praised, Senior's methods are indeed extraordinary. Junior is impressed. Stop flattering me and don't run around. Wait for me to come back. Xianxia dove into the soil and disappeared. The cornucopia of the world commerce had lost its former prosperity. Although the ruins had been cleaned up, it would still take time for the cornucopia to recover its former vitality. The half-collapsed God of Wealth peak became steeper and steeper. The protective formation that had been broken back then could no longer be set up because of Yin Baikong's death. Even if it could be set up, it would certainly not be as powerful as the one Yin Baikong had set up. World Chamber of Commerce no longer had such a capable person. Xianxia stood quietly at the edge of the cliff outside the cornucopia. The suspension bridge leading to the cornucopia was right in front of him. It had lost its usual sense of mystery. The cornucopia was no longer shrouded by clouds and mist, and the situation inside was clear at a glance. Even the Hall of Wealth on the God of Wealth peak could be seen clearly. Xianxia sighed softly. Without Yin Baikong, the World Commerce Association lacked a little flavor. Yin Baikong's courage that day when he was on the brink of death and didn't even care about the afterlife was indeed admirable. Even after thousands of years, if the World Chamber of Commerce still existed, then no one would be able to avoid Yin Baikong, the founder of the World Chamber of Commerce. He could be considered to have died a worthy death, preserving his prestige for a lifetime. Two cultivators came together. It was unknown which sect they were from, but they were about to cross the bridge and enter the treasure basin. Suddenly they noticed a person standing at the bridgehead blocking their way. One of them immediately shouted, Friend, please stand to the side. Don't block the way. Xianxia slowly turned his head and looked at the two indifferently. With a flash, he turned into an afterimage and directly shot towards the God of Wealth peak. The person who shouted immediately clicked his tongue and said, Look at this speed, his cultivation is really extraordinary. I wonder where he came from. Let's go. Why are you in a daze? He pulled the other person. The latter slowly looked at him and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Do you know who you shouted at just now? He's already gone. Who cares who he is? Don't tell me it's the world's #1 expert Yu Qianzhou? Let's go. That person laughed. The other person immediately gave him a thumbs up and said, You guessed it right. He's Yu Qianzhou. The former's face froze. He was stunned on the spot and couldn't laugh anymore. The butcher of the cultivation world in the past, the current punishment master of the demon region, and the world's #1 expert Yu Qianzhou. This person is not a kind person. He's famous for being cruel and merciless. God knows how many people have died in his hands. 4 of the world's top 10 experts have already died in his hands, and I actually asked him to make way. In the Hall of Wealth Reverence, Xikongju and Jing Yuankong were gathered together, working together to discuss the plan to revive the World Commerce Chamber. Suddenly they saw a figure land outside. With his back facing the two of them, he slowly stood under the pine tree with his hands behind his back. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, the two of them wouldn't have realized that someone had arrived. They were instantly shocked. This person's cultivation is so high. The two of them came out in a flash. Xikongju stared at the person's back and said in a deep voice, May I know which expert has graced my cornucopia with his presence? Back then your master often stood here to watch the clouds gather and disperse and the world change. Back then I didn't understand what was so interesting about it, but now I understand. This kind of behavior will slowly cultivate one's character and make one's heart as broad as the heavens and earth. That's why your master self-destructed. If it was fatty pay, even if there was the slightest hope, he would still compromise and live on. This is the difference between people. Some people's arrogance is not on the surface but in their bones. Your master is this kind of person, which is why he can prop up such a huge world commerce chamber. This is courage, something you two brothers should learn from. Yu Qianzhou slowly turned around and looked at the two of them with a smile. Yu Qianzhou. The two of them cried out in unison. Then, as if remembering something, the two of them looked at each other and immediately cupped their hands. Greetings, torture envoy. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to be so polite. He asked with a smile, How is it? Is the World Commerce Chamber all right? No one has any designs on the World Commerce Chamber, right? Xikongju immediately took a step forward and answered, Senior Bai has spoken and the torture envoy has shaken the world, so no one dares to have any designs on the World Commerce Chamber. These words had already expressed their attitude, set their position, and made it clear that the World Commerce Chamber was a part of the demon domain. Although they said this, their hearts were pounding. They didn't know why Yu Qianzhou would suddenly come to God of Wealth Peak. Was he really going to reach out to the World Commerce Chamber? Hehe. Don't be so courteous. I'm here to ask for your help. Yu Qianzhou said bluntly, the World Commerce Chamber's contact network is spread across all the countries. I want you to help me spread a message. Tell all the soul formation experts in the world that the great formation sealing the Holy East lands has been broken, and the trapped experts from the Immortal and Netherworld have already returned. Within 2 days I want all the soul formation experts in the world to gather in the Holy East lands. At that time I have an important announcement. Those who can't get there within 2 days will bear the consequences. Holy East lands. Xikongju and Jing Yuankong were stunned by this news. As Nongzhu knew that this matter was of great importance, she didn't let Nanming Patriarch divulge the news, so everyone didn't know about this news in a short period of time. From Yu Qianzhou's words, the two of them couldn't help but think of the rumors from a while ago. It was said that a large number of mysterious experts had suddenly passed through the skies of China's cultivation world. Seeing that the two of them were still in a daze, Yu Qianzhou frowned and asked indifferently, Can you help me spread the news as quickly as possible? The two of them suddenly came back to their senses and expressed that there was no problem. After a slight pause, Xikongju asked softly, All the soul formation cultivators are going? Then are we going to go as well? Yu Qianzhou stared at the two of them and said in a low voice, You two can discuss it among yourselves. Just one of you will go. After all, the World Chamber of Commerce is such a big business and it needs someone to take charge. If one of you comes, go and experience it. It will be beneficial to the development of the World Chamber of Commerce. Also, Xianxia Island has been destroyed, so there's no need to inform Nanming Patriarch and Nongzhu. The other soul formation experts must be informed. It's up to them whether they want to come or not. Let them decide for themselves. The reason why he didn't want to inform Nongzhu and Nanming Patriarch was mainly because he was worried that those women wouldn't have anyone to protect them. After all, Yan Zhuixing's matter hadn't been completely settled and he didn't know what would happen in the future. After receiving the news, Bing Qingzi's disciples had also disappeared. He ordered Gu Qingyun and Hong Qi to send people to secretly search for them, but there was still no news until now. He didn't know where they were hiding. Because of this, he didn't dare to relax his protection of those women. Although Yan Zhuixing's matter hadn't been completely settled and it made him feel uncomfortable, he didn't have the time to play hide and seek with Yan Zhuixing. He wouldn't give up eating for fear of choking because of Yan Zhuixing. He still had to do what he needed to do. The two of them looked at each other and Sikongju nodded. "We'll go and arrange it now." Yu Qianzhou didn't say much and disappeared on the spot. The two of them looked at each other and Sikongju nodded. "We'll go and arrange it now." Yu Qianzhou didn't say anything else and disappeared on the spot. The two of them were stunned once again. Yu Qianzhou, who had returned to Utopia, immediately found a remote place. He cast the earth mantra and sank several hundred meters underground. Another pile of fluorite was scattered out, and the surrounding soil, which was embedded with fluorite, retreated. In the blink of an eye, a grand underground palace was formed. However, this underground palace wasn't like before. The decorations in the surroundings were arranged in picturesque disorder. Standing in it would give people a feeling of being in a mysterious formation. After spending half a day and putting in a lot of effort to carve the underground palace to make it more mysterious, he nodded in satisfaction and silently memorized the layout before disappearing on the spot. When he appeared again, he appeared in the underground palace where he had met the underworld saintess. He released his divine sense and scanned the surroundings. After confirming that there was no one around, he waved his hand and pointed at the ground. The dark stone floor melted and the soil underground also melted. He slowly walked down and a slanted underground tunnel formed. When he was nearly 100 meters down, he scattered another pile of fluorite and executed the earth art. Soon, a magnificent underground palace that was exactly the same as the one under Utopia was formed. Looking around the underground palace, a smile appeared on his lips. The reason why he put in so much effort was because he couldn't always fool others like how he had fooled Immortal Crocodile. That method could fool one or two people, but it would be unbearable to fool a large group of people. Now that he had created two identical places, he wouldn't have to be afraid even if he was in Utopia. Chapter 8:13. In the sky above the vast East Sea, more than 300 soul formation experts gathered in a group and quickly flew toward the East Holy Land. The lineup was huge and spectacular, rarely seen in the cultivation world. They were led by Nongzhu, Wenlanfeng, Li Duxing and Hu Changshou, the three experts at the last stage of transforming spirit realm. They were also the only few experts at the last stage of transforming spirit realm in the cultivation world except for Yu Qianzhou. Most of the other soul formation experts had died in the hands of the previous torturers of the demon ghost region. The hundreds of people behind them were mostly lords in the middle stage of the soul formation realm. There were also some in the early stage like Sikongju. Lu Yanqing was also in this group. There was no other way, she was also a soul formation expert. Who would dare to disobey the order of the demon ghost region's torturer? The death of Pei Fong and the others was a warning. At this time, Lu Yanqing was no longer wearing the gauze hat she wore when she went out. Her short hair was wrapped in a piece of gauze, and her expression was neither happy nor sad. The appearance of her stunning appearance should have attracted everyone's attention, but everyone's expressions were grave. No one could be satisfied with her at this time. Looking down at the surging waves of the ocean below, everyone's emotions were fluctuating like the ocean. Right now, the opening of the East Holy Land wasn't the thing they were most concerned about. What they were most worried about was something else. The appointment at the East Sea again. The soul formation experts' hearts trembled at the thought of this word. The previous torturer of the demon ghost region by Changchun had invited everyone to the East Sea to show off his power. He had ruthlessly slaughtered several people and intimidated the entire cultivation world. Now the new torturer of the demon ghost region had come to the East Sea again. Oh my god. What did Yu Qianzhou want to do? Did he want to ruthlessly show off his power like his master? Was the death of Pei Fong, Ouyang De, Qi Jujuan and Bing Qingzi not enough? When the group received the order from the World Chamber of Commerce, they were all dumbfounded. They hurriedly used the communication array to contact each other. only to find that everyone had received a terrible invitation. Actually, no one wanted to go, but no one dared to say no. Xianxia's vicious and merciless methods were well known. In the end, a group of people came up with a good idea. All of them gathered in the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea and begged Nongzhu to speak for them at the critical moment, because Nongzhu had a good relationship with the two torture envoys of the demon ghost region. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming didn't know that Xianxia had summoned all the deification realm experts in the world to gather in the East Holy Land. Seeing this group of people coming together, Nongzhu almost jumped in fright, thinking that this group of people wanted to join hands to deal with her. When he figured out what was going on, he also thought that Xianxia was trying to copy old Bai Liwei. Even the place he picked was so similar. Since Xianxia wanted to make a move, it wasn't appropriate for him to interfere. He didn't want to come. However, he could not resist everyone's pleading. Moreover, seeing that when Lan Feng, Lu Yanqing and the others had also received an invitation, he could no longer ignore it. So he left ancestor Nanming to look after the house and rushed over with a group of people. Above the undulating blue sea, the group of people all stopped at the place where there was supposed to be called Xianxian Island. They looked around, but there was no trace of Xianxian Island. Looking ahead again, the East Holy Land, which had been covered by the white fog for many years, finally unveiled its mysterious veil. Everyone looked ahead in a daze. No matter whether they believed it or not, that mysterious land was in front of them. Nongzhu looked back at the crowd and said with a wry smile, "Since everyone is here, let's go and have a look together." Then she took the lead and flew over, followed by a group of people. As soon as they arrived in the sky above the East Holy Land, they couldn't help looking around, but they didn't find how dangerous this legendary place was. It seemed to be no different from the land on the other side of the sea. They looked around but didn't find Xianxia's figure. There. Li Duxing's eyes flashed and his only arm pointed to a towering steel not far away. It stood in front of them like a tower and was very conspicuous. Nongzhu led a group of people to fly over again. There was a big arrow on the steel and there were words beside it. "Go straight in the direction of the arrow. I'll wait for you in front. Come as soon as possible and destroy the steel after you've seen it." Xianxia. The group of people looked at each other and then at each other. They didn't know what Xianxia was doing. It didn't look like he was going to use them to show his power. The arrowhead pointed to the east. Nongzhu struck out a fierce gang wind with one palm. With a loud bang, the earth steel disintegrated instantly. Then she waved her hand and said, "Let's go. Let's go and see what that guy is doing." The group of people quickly flew toward the east. The mountains and rivers below passed quickly under their eyes, and they were amazed by the occasional glimpse of the indigenous tribes. On the way, they occasionally saw cities and secular people bustling on the streets of the cities. They couldn't believe that this was the legendary dangerous Holy Land of East. They flew for a whole day but still didn't see Xianxia's figure. They all suspected that they had bumped into Xianxia. But they had been flying east according to the direction of Xianxia's arrow. They didn't change their direction. Just as everyone was flying above a vast primeval forest, in the midst of a mountain range, a shout suddenly came from below. "Stop flying here, it's right here." Hearing that, they stopped and looked down. They vaguely saw Xianxia waving to them on the top of a towering hill. He shouted, come down, don't dawdle. Come down, it's here. Let's go." Nongzhu seemed to have become the leader. With a shout, she led everyone to fly down together. When everyone floated in front of Xianxia couldn't help but be stunned when he saw Nongzhu. He said, "I didn't ask you to come, why are you here?" Nongzhu said unhappily, "You made such a big commotion, I had to come even if I didn't want to." As he said that, he turned to look at the people behind him. Many people turned their heads guiltily. They were the people who urged him to come. When Lan Feng subconsciously turned to look at Lu Yanqing and found that she was biting her lips and staring at Xianxia first counted everyone. Seeing that except for Nanming ancestor and Jing Yuankong, everyone who should be here was here, he immediately waved his hand and said, "All right. Everyone follow me." He flew towards a gloomy valley in the middle of the towering mountains. Nongzhu followed behind and shouted, "What on earth do you want to do by bringing us here?" When everyone landed in the gloomy call, they immediately found that there was a mountain gate on the side of the concave mountain wall. It was a dark mountain gate that led to an underground cave residence. They really couldn't see it from the top, so they had to stand in front of it. The stone-carved mountain gate was grand, simple and elegant. There were strange patterns carved on it, and it was obvious that it was a very old thing. The underground cave residence behind the mountain gate was dark, and a gust of cold air was coming out from inside. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was walking toward the mountain gate, and asked suspiciously, "What did you bring us here for? What is this place?" Standing on the steps of the mountain gate, Yu Qianqiu turned to look at everyone and explained with a smile, "This is a good place. Back then there were immortals from the immortal world who were trapped in the East Holy Land. They ruled this continent and built an immortal city on the ground, but it was empty now. The other group of people who were trapped were the meditation cultivators from the underworld. They dug out an underground world under this mountain, and this is the entrance to the underground world. When the East Holy Land was broken, all the immortals and meditation cultivators went home, leaving behind this empty underworld." Everyone was shocked. Although Yu Qianqiu said that the people from the underworld had all left, they still couldn't help but feel a chill on their backs. They all looked at the entrance behind Yu Qianqiu in horror. The corner of Nongzhu's mouth twitched. "You called us here just to let us see this? Why, you don't like it?" Yu Qianqiu stood in the middle of the mountain gate and sneered, "Don't be fooled by the creepy atmosphere in here. Let me tell you, there is an amazing treasure hidden in here. Once you see it, I'm afraid I won't be able to chase you away." Although his words were pleasant to hear, everyone's face was filled with doubt. "If there was really such a good treasure, why did you call us here?" Nongzhu frowned and said in a low voice, "Yu Qianqiu, don't make fun of us. It's such a secret place, hidden in such a vast mountain range. How did you find this place? Damn it. Why did you come here and pretend to be a good person? You made it inconvenient for me to use violence." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, "Did you forget that after the East Holy Land formation was broken, my master went back to Shantian Island?" Nongzhu was stunned. "Did Old Bai tell you the location before he went to the underworld?" Everyone was shocked again. Bai Changchun actually came out of the East Holy Land and went to the underworld. Nonsense. If my master didn't tell me, how could I find this place? Yu Qianqiu suddenly chuckled and said, "I won't hide it from you all. I found a shocking secret here. There's a teleportation formation here that leads to an abandoned immortal grass garden from the immortal world. I have already gone there once through the teleportation array, but it is too big and the immortal herbs are scattered in the mountains. I don't have enough manpower to search for them by myself. Plus there are some ferocious beasts in there. Those who are not at the demigod realm can't handle them. So I thought of asking for your help. But don't worry, I won't let you work for nothing. Everyone will get a share of the immortal herbs." Everyone looked at each other. They were all skeptical of this statement. Nongzhu sneered and said, "Since there is a teleportation array here, why would those people from the immortal world and the underworld be trapped for so long? Who's afraid of a glib tongue?" Yu Qianqiu's expression turned serious and said, "The heaven and earth formation that seals the East Holy Land is no small matter. It was set up by the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch himself. As the name suggests, it can seal the heaven and earth. In the beginning, they didn't realize that the heaven and earth formation could isolate the teleportation function of the teleportation array. After it was built, they found out that it was useless. In the end, they left it and let us take advantage of it." Chapter 8:14. In the gloomy valley, over 300 soul-forming stage experts were silent. Contrasted with the surrounding environment, the atmosphere was a little strange. Ring Yu Qianqiu's words were earth-shattering, but everyone still maintained a skeptical attitude. What kind of people were there? They were people who had experienced the cruel survival of the fittest in the cultivation world. How could they be convinced by a few words when faced with such a mysterious matter? Everyone's eyes were fixed on the pitch-black entrance to the underworld. No one knew what was inside, but no matter how they looked at it, it was dangerous. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept around. Seeing that everyone was suspicious and silent, he was instantly enraged. He snorted coldly, "Let me make this clear today. Those who are willing to come in and help me, we will be friends in the future. Those who are unwilling, we will be enemies in the future. You guys decide for yourselves." If Nongzhu had not come to join in the fun, he would not have been so polite. Now that he was too lazy to be long-winded, he directly made his threat. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately turned around and walked inside. Yu Qianqiu's words were very obvious. Whether they lived or died, it was up to them. Everyone was dumbfounded. The corner of Nongzhu's mouth twitched. She cursed in her heart. Sure enough, a dog can't change its spots. He revealed his true nature in less than 3 sentences. Yu Qianchou. Nongzhu shouted and stopped Yu Qianchou in a flash. She frowned and said, "They didn't say that they wouldn't help you. But even I think it's too mysterious, let alone them. You have to let them think about it." Yu Qianchou raised his eyebrows and sneered, "Do you think I will harm you?" Nongzhu was stunned. After thinking about it, she realized that this brat would not harm her. After a pause, she said, "To be able to survive in the cultivation world to this day, who hasn't been careful, one step at a time?" Before she could finish, Yu Qianchou waved a jade archive in his hand and interrupted her. "I found this in the Immortal herb garden. There are illustrations of various kinds of immortal herbs in it. Take a look. If you still don't believe me, then there's nothing I can do. You guys decide for yourselves." Nongzhu took it suspiciously and injected her divine sense into it to have a look. She was immediately attracted by all kinds of vivid and lifelike immortal herbs, which seemed to be swaying in front of her eyes. The rarest part was that there were various kinds of immortal herbs prices listed inside, easily going up to several 100 million divine grade spirit stones. The detailed notes also indicated that this immortal herb was the main ingredient of a certain immortal pill. The things inside were just too shocking. The names of some elixirs seemed to have been heard of in legends. Nongzhu felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She withdrew her divine sense and stared at Yu Qianchou in astonishment. Everyone looked at each other, wondering what Nongzhu had seen that made her look so lost. For a moment, everyone was curious and wanted to see what was inside. Suddenly Nongzhu cried out involuntarily, "Are there really these things in there? Believe it or not, it's up to you." Yu Qianchou snorted coldly. Lu Yanqing's lips quivered slightly. She had established herself in the cultivation world with her medical skills and was sensitive to all kinds of rare spiritual herbs. Now that she heard about immortal herbs and Nongzhu's loss of composure, it was hard for her not to be tempted. When Lan Feng glanced at her and moved to Nongzhu's side in a flash. She took out the jade archive from Nongzhu's hand and injected her divine sense into it to have a look. She was immediately captivated by what she saw. After a long time, she came to her senses and moved to Lu Yanqing's side, passing the jade archive to her in silence. Lu Yanqing could not wait to receive it. After a brief examination, her delicate body trembled and she eagerly immersed herself in the fantasy world of the immortal herbs inside the jade archive. Yu Qianchou waited for a while and grew impatient. At this rate, there was nothing they could do. He immediately shouted, "Great miracle healer Lu, we don't have time to wait for you. Everyone quickly turn it around. One look is enough. Once we enter the immortal herb garden, we can look at the real thing." When Lu Yanqing regained her senses, she looked a little embarrassed. However, she still reluctantly passed the jade archive to the others. Thus, the jade archive was turned around in everyone's hands and finally returned to Yu Qianchou's hands. Those who had seen the jade archive had their eyes lit up. Not to mention the miraculous effects of the immortal herbs. Just the value of each stock in divine grade spirit stones was enough to make one's heart palpitate. After looking at the contents of the jade archive, they compared it to the items in the cultivation world. The items in the jade archive were simply rubbish. Everyone was considered to have seen a lot in the cultivation world. The details of the jade archive were intricately engraved, definitely not the work of an ordinary person. In the cultivation world, they had never seen something so lifelike engraved on a jade archive. Everyone knew that with their cultivation, they would not be able to achieve such a feat. However, there was one thing they could be sure of: this jade archive was not a fake. Yu Qianchou put away the jade archive. Disregarding everyone's agreement, he said indifferently, "The underground palace is very complicated and dangerous. Everyone follow closely. I won't be responsible if anything happens." He turned around and entered. Unexpectedly, while everyone was still hesitating, Hu Changshou took the lead and followed behind Yu Qianchou. Nongzhu was next, then Lu Yanqing, followed by Wen Lanfeng, Li Duxing, Sikongju. At this point there was nothing more to think about. Everyone entered the underground palace one after another. Those who were overly cautious and did not want to enter could not bear the consequences of offending Yu Qianchou. Thus they could only follow the crowd and enter. In the blink of an eye, the secluded valley outside became empty. The world inside the underworld was indeed vast. The passages were as dense as a woven web. If one was not careful, it was possible to take a wrong turn. It was obvious that the underworld had gone through many twists and turns. Many places had collapsed ruins. In addition, Yu Qianzhou had said that this place was dangerous. Everyone followed closely behind the people in front, afraid that they would lose track of them. Under Yu Qianzhou's guidance, everyone soon arrived at the Holy Temple. Here Yu Qianzhou stood in front of the tunnel that the Holy Temple had created and waited for a while. When everyone had arrived, he secretly counted the number of people. When he found that everyone was present, he immediately waved his hand and pointed to the surrounding walls. He smiled and said, "Since everyone has come here, we can't let you come empty-handed. It's good to broaden your horizons. Everyone can take a look at the carvings on the surrounding walls. Can anyone guess who these carvings are?" Hearing this, everyone looked around curiously. From the carvings on the walls, they could tell that they were from a very long time ago. On the left and right sides, there were carvings of 6 generals in battle armor. All of them looked mighty and extraordinary. Everyone couldn't help but look at the high platform in the middle where the 12 generals were staring. The carving there was of a scholar with only his back visible. It looked like he was splashing ink by the side of a table. Hu Changshou, who was standing next to Yu Qianzhou, stared at the carvings with suspicion. He muttered, "Could it be that the one in the middle is the legendary emperor of the underworld?" Clap, clap. Yu Qianzhou suddenly clapped his hands. The crisp sound echoed in the Holy Temple. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, "Palace Lord who has a good eye. When I first saw him, I couldn't believe that this scholar was the legendary emperor of the underworld. However, the truth is the truth. This person is indeed the emperor of the underworld." Gasps could be heard in the Holy Temple. That was the legendary emperor of the underworld. Everyone's eyes widened as they carefully looked at the scholar. The more they looked, the more they felt that the back of the scholar was very mysterious. It would have been better if he had only shown his back, but it gave everyone a mysterious feeling. Everyone's hearts involuntarily filled with awe and veneration. No one could have imagined that they would see the legendary emperor of the underworld. Although it was just a mural with a back, the back of that illusory figure was finally revealed. Yu Qianzhou smiled as he stood to the side and looked at everyone's reaction. The reason why he introduced all this was to let everyone get used to it. With the back of the emperor of the underworld as a cushion, they wouldn't feel weak when they went out and met the shrimp soldiers and crab generals of the immortal world. "Do you know who the figures on the 2 sides of the wall are?" Yu Qianzhou asked as he pointed to the 2 sides of the wall. After looking at it for a while, everyone shook their heads slightly. That era was too far away from them. In the legends that were still being passed down, everyone only knew about the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld. They knew that these two were the rulers of the immortal world and the underworld. Everything else was vague. Yu Qianzhou was indeed ready to start enlightening them. He was ready to open up a wider world for them to accompany him on his journey. He stood there and said with assurance, "Under the immortal emperor of the immortal world, there are 12 immortal monarchs. Under the emperor of the underworld, there are 12 underworld generals. The figures on the 2 sides of the wall are the 12 underworld generals of the underworld." 12 underworld generals. Everyone was in an uproar. Their minds were in a mess as they kept looking at the carvings on the 2 sides of the wall. "Everyone, don't be too concerned. The experts of the immortal world and the underworld are not as scary as you think." Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly and said, "Let me tell you the truth. After I used the teleportation array to go there, I have killed dozens of cultivators from the immortal world." His words caused an uproar in the underground palace. Nongzhu snorted coldly and said, "Are you kidding me?" Yu Qianzhou chuckled and said, "I'm not kidding. In fact, there are many people in the immortal world whose cultivation base is lower than ours. You will understand when you see them. Of course, there are many who have a higher cultivation base than us." As he said that, he suddenly untied the storage pouch hanging on his waist and took out the things inside. With a whoosh sound, a pile of shiny black spirit stones piled up to his shoulder. Yu Qianzhou casually picked up a spirit stone from the pile and said with a smile, "Everyone, do you know what this is? I snatched these from the immortal world. Everyone take a piece and have a look." Everyone stared at the pile of spirit stones with their mouths agape. They could vaguely guess what it was, but none of them dared to confirm it. Standing to the side, Hu Changshou reached out to grab a piece and held it in his palm. He immediately exclaimed, "Divine-grade spirit stones, they are really divine-grade spirit stones." His exclamation was shocking. Adding on to the fact that Yu Qianzhou had asked everyone to take a piece to have a look, everyone immediately reached out and grabbed a piece from the air. A moment later, cries of divine-grade spirit stones filled the entire holy palace. Everyone stared at the pile of divine-grade spirit stones in disbelief. If a divine-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 million high-grade spirit stones, then wouldn't the total value of the divine-grade spirit stones here be more than 1 trillion high-grade spirit stones? In an instant, everyone's eyes were burning with passion. Chapter 8:15. Nongzhu stared at Yu Qianzhou with an exaggerated expression. Back then Yin Baikong was considered rich, right? He was indeed rich. But compared to this guy he was nothing. This guy was too rich, with a net worth of trillions of upper-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianzhou smiled at everyone's fanatical expressions. This was the effect he wanted. He wanted to stimulate everyone's enthusiasm. Suddenly he heard a clattering sound. He turned his head and looked. In the blink of an eye, Nongzhu had already stuffed a few handfuls of spirit stones into his storage bag. F***ck. Yu Qianzhou let out a strange cry, and quickly snatched the large pile of spirit stones on the ground and put them into his storage bag. Nongzhu held a handful of spirit stones in each hand and laughed wildly. In a short while he had collected hundreds of spirit stones worth billions of upper-grade spirit stones. Nongzhu had never been so rich. This money came so easily. Take it back. Yu Qianzhou shouted. Haha. Nongzhu looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. She put the spirit stones in her hands into the storage bag and walked to the side. She looked like she was ready to be bitten. This rascal could not be beaten, but he was not afraid of being scolded. Yu Qianzhou did not know what to do with him at the moment. He could only comfort himself by saying that it was the accommodation fee for Furong and the others in the purple bamboo forest. But the accommodation fee that was worth 10 billion high-grade spirit stones was too damn expensive. Yu Qianzhou felt like crying. He said to the crowd angrily, "Take the spirit stones in your hands as a gift. All of you follow me to the celestial realm to make a fortune." The last sentence was almost shouted out. He turned around and walked into the tunnel. Wu Changtian was unusually enthusiastic this time. He was the first to follow. The crowd looked at each other and someone shouted, "Let's go to the celestial realm to make a fortune." This sentence seemed to be more effective than 10 sentences from Yu Qianzhou. It immediately caused everyone's emotions to explode. Everyone was so excited that they scrambled to be the first to enter the tunnel. Once they reached the underground palace, they quickly looked around and found that it was indeed a large array. Yu Qianzhou did a head count and said in a low voice, "Everyone don't move. I'm going to activate the teleportation portal." Everyone's eyes quickly focused on him. They saw that there was a pentagonal platform in front of him. When he pressed his palm against the center of the platform, a wave of divine sense quickly enveloped everyone. Everyone immediately tensed up. They felt as though the entire underground palace had moved a little. Suddenly their eyes lit up and their surroundings had changed. Everyone looked around and discovered that they were in a misty valley. The sky was white and misty and they couldn't see the sun. Amidst his shock he suddenly discovered that the misty white fog was actually formed by the condensation of dense spiritual energy. It was indeed not a place that the human world could compare with. Suddenly someone shouted, "Everyone be careful, there has been a fight here." None of these people were to be trifled with. They were all ambitious and ruthless characters. Their reactions were top-notch. As soon as they heard someone shout out those words, they immediately spread out in all directions. Their magic tools were already in their hands, and their gazes were like owls as they looked around vigilantly. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, "Don't be nervous, everyone. These people were already dead when I left." Everyone heaved a sigh of relief, but they didn't need to say anything. They almost subconsciously formed groups of 2 or 3, leaning against each other with their backs against each other, and silently looked around every corner of the valley. When they were in the human world they might have been enemies, but in this foreign land, they suddenly became incomparably trusting and unprecedentedly united. Nongzhu looked around and immediately asked curiously, "Is this the Immortal Herb Garden?" Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and said, "This Immortal Herb Garden is called the Realm of Divine Ruins. Legend has it that it was a place for cultivation opened by the ancient gods, but it was later abandoned for some reason. It opens to the immortal realm once every 100 years for a month. During this period, all the sects in the immortal realm will send people to search for rare treasures. After his embellishment and evasive description, he exaggerated this place into a treasure bowl with little risk and great opportunities. Everyone's eyes shone brightly, looking around from time to time. When they saw a weed that they didn't recognize, they immediately thought it was an immortal herb. They couldn't bear to move their eyes away. What if it was a herb that was worth 100 million divine-grade spirit stones? Excited. As for the matter of the Immortal Palace sending hundreds of Immortal Realm Masters into the realm of divine ruins, everyone had directly forgotten about it. In Yu Qianzhou's words, "We don't provoke Immortal Realm Masters. We specialize in dealing with those spirit-severing stage masters. We specialize in robbing those spirit-severing stage masters." More than 300 spirit-severing stage masters should be enough to deal with one person, right? Everyone, don't be too excited. After all, this is the immortal world's territory. Although getting rich is a big deal, safety is still the first priority. Although I, Yu Qianzhou, have quarreled with everyone in the past at this moment. As the saying goes, people are especially cheap when they are away from home. Being in the immortal world, the first thing we must do is to stick together. Only by protecting ourselves and our strength can we have a chance to get rich. Sooner or later there will be a place for us in the immortal world. In short, I, Yu Qianzhou, as the Demon Ghost Region's punishment envoy, since I brought everyone here safely, I have the responsibility and obligation to bring everyone back safely. I hope that everyone won't be blinded by money and become hot-headed. In the days to come, I, Yu Qianzhou, will still need everyone's help in the immortal world. Please take care of yourselves. Yu Qianzhou looked at everyone with an affectionate look, giving a passionate speech. At first, this guy fooled everyone and made them think that the immortal world was just SOSO. Then he began to pour cold water on them. Both good and bad people were involved. However, the tempting bait had been thrown out. In addition, it was human nature that it was easy to be prejudiced by first impressions. The most irresistible temptation was the chance to become an immortal and forge an immortal body. This was a legend that had not been heard in the cultivation world for many years. Since there was such an easy chance, everyone would give it a try even if they had to risk their lives. Torture envoy. A shout came from the crowd. Yu Nantian, who was dressed in a fluffy white fur coat and had an extremely elegant temperament, walked over slowly. He cupped his hands and asked unhurriedly, "Torture envoy, you said that as long as we collect enough immortal herbs, we can all forge an immortal body. How can we believe that your guarantee is true?" Yu Qianzhou's expression turned solemn. He raised one hand and solemnly said, "As long as everyone works together with me, I swear that I will do my best to help everyone realize this wish in the shortest time possible. If I break this oath, let me die a horrible death." As soon as this oath was made, everyone became even more spirited. To them, oaths were not fun. Previously, Bing Qingzi had made a heaven-defying oath, and in the end he really did fulfill his oath and ended up dying a horrible death. Everyone believed it without a doubt. Little did they know that after hearing Immortal Crocodile's words, Yu Qianzhou treated oaths as if they were farts. However, it was true that he wanted to help everyone improve their cultivation. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianzhou in surprise. At first she thought that this guy was up to something again. She did not expect that he would really do it this time. "Good." Yu Nantian clapped his hands and shouted. He also raised his hand and said, "Since Torture Enforcer Yu has made an oath, I, Yu Nantian, will also make an oath. As long as Torture Enforcer Yu sincerely helps us realize our long-cherished wish of immortality, I, Yu Nantian, am willing to serve you faithfully. If I break this oath, may the heavens and the earth destroy me." As soon as he finished speaking, Hu Changshou could not wait to make a solemn oath as well. To be honest, everyone noticed Hu Changshou's unusual behavior. It seemed that ever since he received Yu Qianzhou's invitation, he had been using his actions to express his desire to chase after Yu Qianzhou, which puzzled everyone. This was called knowing one's own business. How could others know the pain and fear in Hu Changshou's heart? Except for Yin Baikong, the other 4 from the 2 alliances of the top 10 masters had all died in the hands of Yu Qianzhou. Now he was the only one left. When he received Yu Qianzhou's invitation, he was scared out of his wits. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that if Yu Qianzhou wanted to establish his might, the first person Yu Qianzhou would deal with would surely be him. If he didn't behave, then this fellow Yu Qianzhou wasn't a good person. With 2 people taking the lead, the others also made an oath to follow. In the blink of an eye, many people could not help but laugh out loud. No one had expected that they would work together like this. Nongzhu knew Xianxia all too well. She stood silently at the side, watching the fanatical expressions on everyone's faces. She felt that something was wrong. In fact, she was not the only one. There were many others who were not as hot-headed as Yu Qianqiu, but they had been tricked into this place by Yu Qianqiu. Not only would they not be able to return, they might not even be able to keep their lives. Thus they could only go with the flow. Since everyone thinks so highly of me, Yu Qianqiu, then I will no longer hold back. Otherwise I would be too petty. Yu Qianqiu took out the 100 sets of illustrated jade archives from his storage pouch and put one away in front of everyone. Then he said in all seriousness, "Here are 99 sets of illustrated jade archives that contain almost all the rare treasures in the immortal realm. We have more than 300 people. Everyone look for each other and form groups of 3 or 4. We will be divided into 99 groups. Each of us will take a set of the illustrated jade archives. Our grand plan begins now." Haha. Roars of laughter rang out in the valley. Everyone immediately looked for people they were on good terms with in the past to form a group. In an instant, the valley descended into chaos. Damn it! Don't they know how to restrain themselves? Do they really think this is a vegetable garden? Yu Qianqiu looked outside the valley warily. He suddenly burrowed into the ground and pulled Shui Mingqing out under everyone's watchful eyes. The valley immediately quietened down. Everyone's eyes were focused on Shui Mingqing, and Shui Mingqing was completely dumbfounded. The people before him were all dressed differently, and each of them had an extraordinary aura. Although they were all cultivators in the soul-forming stage, they faintly exuded an air of superiority that he could not compare to. He was very sure that these people were definitely not the dull disciples from the various sects who had been restrained for a long time. Their gazes were like owls, sending chills down one's spine. Chapter 8:16. Shui Mingqing's late-stage soul formation cultivation naturally attracted everyone's attention. The cultivation world had never seen this person before, so everyone vaguely guessed that he was someone from the celestial world. "Everyone, let me introduce a friend to everyone." Yu Qianqiu pointed at Shui Mingqing and introduced, "Shui Mingqing, a disciple of the celestial world's #1 alchemy sect, Heaven Palace. In the future we will definitely have frequent dealings with Heaven Palace." The last sentence had a profound meaning and everyone's eyes lit up. Dealing with the celestial world's #1 alchemy sect was naturally for immortal pills. More than 300 people cupped their hands towards Shui Mingqing with friendly expressions, which made Shui Mingqing feel a little flattered. He had never been treated so respectfully by so many soul formation cultivators, so he cupped his hands in return. His flattered appearance immediately made everyone feel disdainful, and they believed Yu Qianqiu's words even more. The soul formation cultivators in the celestial world were only SOSO. After the greetings, the 99 groups of soul formation cultivators each received a set of jade archives, and then they gathered together to discuss how to search for treasures. In the end, under Yu Qianqiu's decision, it was decided that the 99 groups would form a large triangular formation to sweep through the ruins of God. The few late-stage soul formation cultivators would be in the center of the triangular formation, coordinating with each other. The biggest advantage of such a formation was safety. No matter which point of the triangular formation was in danger, the people on both sides could quickly gather to support, and the late-stage soul formation cultivators in the center could also arrive as quickly as possible. This way, everyone's safety was greatly guaranteed. No matter who it was, as long as they dared to invade them, they would have to bear the combined attack of 200 or so soul formation cultivators from both sides. The power of this combined attack was terrifying and huge. Of course, this kind of power was only relative to the soul formation cultivators in the celestial world, and it might not be enough to deal with celestial experts. However, Yu Qianqiu had a strict requirement, and that was, no matter what spirit stones or rare treasures they obtained, they had to be immediately sent by one of the groups to the late-stage soul formation cultivator in the center of the triangular formation. The late-stage soul formation cultivator would take care of them, and everyone would supervise each other. No one was allowed to hide anything, and they would discuss the distribution afterwards. Shui Mingqing, who was watching silently from the side, was completely speechless when he saw the smug look on their faces. What kind of people are they? Yu Qianqiu kept glancing at Shui Mingqing. If he wanted to cooperate with Chaotian Palace after this, if he didn't show some strength, he was afraid that they wouldn't pay attention to him. He wanted to let Skyward Palace know through Shui Mingqing's mouth that he was not an ordinary person. Only when there was a factor that made the other party pay attention to him would it be possible for them to sit down and talk. After the 2 levels of rescue signals were unified, the group finally arrived outside the valley and set up a formation ready to set off. The so-called 2 levels of rescue signals were the distress signals that were used when one was in trouble. When a level 2 signal was sent out, the people on both sides would quickly rush over to help. When a level 1 signal was sent out, everyone would rush over to help. If it was a small problem that could be solved by themselves, they naturally wouldn't send out a distress signal. At the request of Wen Lanfeng and Li Duxing, Lu Yanqing was also left in the center of the triangular formation. No one had any opinion on this. First of all, many people owed Lu Yanqing a favor. Second, if anyone was injured, Lu Yanqing would be in the middle to provide support and treatment so everyone could feel at ease. Moreover, everyone knew Lu Yanqing's character more or less. Fighting and killing was really not suitable for her. Whoever teamed up with her would probably be a burden. Shui Mingqing was also left in the center of the triangular formation. Nongzhu and several other experts at the late stage of Huashan realm, as well as the lords of other countries, had received a hint from Yu Qianzhou. They knew that this person was a starting point of contact with Chaotian Palace. He was of value to everyone at present, so they wouldn't let him leave the team easily. 99 groups of people formed a triangular formation, covering an area of nearly a kilometer, and began to slowly advance to the depths of the Divine Ruin realm on foot. Although they were in a dangerous place, it was easy for everyone to remain vigilant. To be able to become a lord, everyone was more or less a person with some foresight. Everyone understood that this was not the cultivation world, where all the scheming would only bring disaster to themselves. Here, everyone could only maximize their own interests by working together. After the mutual taboos of the past were replaced by mutual trust, everyone was immediately filled with confidence. With all the elite experts of the world gathered, even the heavens would have to poke a hole in it. What else was there to be afraid of? At this time, everyone realized that it was such a pleasant thing to trust each other. Even if they were in danger, it would be like walking on flat ground. At least they didn't have to worry about someone stabbing them in the back. Instead, there was someone protecting them from behind. This unprecedented feeling was too wonderful for everyone. As they sighed, they faintly felt a sense of cherishing. The triangular formation was advancing in a triangular vanguard, led by Yunnan Tian and the 2 lords. The 3 of them each held a jade archive and compared it as they walked. Yunnan Tian was dressed in a white velvet coat. Coupled with his graceful and luxurious temperament, he felt as if he was strolling leisurely in the Divine Ruin realm. Quick look at this. This stalk of grass looks rather special. It's very likely to be an immortal herb, one of them said excitedly as he pointed at a stalk of small purple leaf grass. Yunanshan's eyes brightened. He took a serious look at the appearance of the small leaf grass, then quickly injected his divine sense into the jade archive and quickly browsed through it. The other 2 also quickly searched through the jade archive with mid to low-grade immortal herb illustrations. After they were done examining it, they looked at each other, shook their heads and continued forward. At first their speed was rather slow. After everyone repeatedly compared the jade archive, they gradually formed an impression of the contents. Most of the weeds in the Divine Ruin realm could be eliminated with a glance. With the powerful memory of these elites of the world, it didn't take them half a day to memorize most of the contents of a jade archive after repeatedly browsing through it. Thus, everyone exchanged jade archives of high, low and middle grades, and the speed at which they advanced gradually increased. As for Yu Qianzhou, he was a person who couldn't stay idle. With so many people searching for spiritual herbs, he wouldn't make much of a difference. He had already separated himself from the crowd and headed towards the depths of the Divine Ruin realm. As for how big the Divine Ruin realm was, Yu Qianzhou had no idea. Thus he didn't know where the deepest part of the Divine Ruin realm was. According to common logic, the entrance to the Divine Ruin realm extended in all directions. The deeper one went, the deeper one went. After leaving the triangular formation and flying for a while, he could gradually sense that there were people coming and going in his desolate surroundings. From time to time, someone would use their divine sense to spy on him. The people hiding in the dark were very careful. When they saw him flying so casually in the Divine Ruin realm alone, coupled with the fact that they couldn't see through his cultivation, They immediately guessed that he wasn't a good person and took the initiative to hide far away. From time to time, Yu Qianqiu would sweep his cold gaze around, but he couldn't be bothered to argue with them. When the people in the triangular formation behind him pressed forward, with the fanaticism of those 300 people, these people would definitely suffer. Even if they didn't provoke the experts of the various countries, the latter wouldn't let them off so easily. As they flew forward, more and more people appeared. In the end, they could already see groups of people wandering around the mountains looking for treasures. Traces of fighting could be seen everywhere in the mountains. The corpses with broken limbs told of the cruel battles that had taken place before. The battles below would always happen inadvertently, and Yu Qianqiu would always stop and watch with the mentality of watching a good show. Often when one side suddenly discovered some rare treasure that had yet to be collected, the other side also discovered it. The two groups of people would immediately rush over crazily to snatch it, quickly fighting each other. However, when this happened, the surrounding people would immediately smell blood like locusts and approach them covetously. Regardless of whose hands the stolen treasures ended up in, the onlookers would quickly judge the strength of the person who got the treasures from the fight. If the person who got the treasures was still strong enough, naturally no one would dare to touch them. Another point was to evaluate the value of the treasure and whether it was worth risking one's life to snatch it. If the value was very high, even if the winner was strong enough, it would still be a very troublesome matter. At the same time, there would be a few groups of people following behind looking for opportunities to snatch it. After standing on the small hill and watching the bloody fight, he realized that there were many malicious gazes staring at him who was alone. Yu Qianqiu sneered and jumped up. He flew over the heads of those people without the slightest scruple at a distance of more than 10 meters from the ground. Such an arrogant move was indeed quite a deterrent. In addition, they couldn't see through his cultivation, so no one dared to act rashly. They watched him leave. After flying forward for a short while, he suddenly realized that there were a few more groups of people gathered in front of him. They seemed to be watching something. Yu Qianqiu didn't stand on ceremony and landed in the middle of the crowd. He immediately attracted a lot of surprised and doubtful gazes. Yu Qianqiu blatantly ignored them. He stared at the concave ground below and frowned. The situation below was the same as what he had seen before. There were two groups of people confronting each other. What made him frown was that he knew both sides of the confrontation. One side was the dozen or so people in blue who had killed Shui Mingqing's fellow disciples in the valley, and the other side was Mu Tianjiao and the others. At this time, Mu Tianjiao and the others looked a little battered and exhausted. There were only a dozen or so people left out of the more than 20 people who were surrounded by the dozen or so people in blue in the concave ground. There were two teams of people standing beside Yu Qianqiu. Both teams were unharmed, and each still had the same number of 30 people when they came in. One team was dressed in yellow and the other team was dressed in bright red. The two young men, who were obviously the leaders of the two teams, stood side by side in a relaxed manner. They chatted casually as if they didn't care about the dangers of the Divine Ruin realm at all. However, their eyes were always staring at Yu Qianqiu. The disciples of the emotion-severing sect are really strong. I heard that they were so arrogant that they split into two groups. They have already destroyed a lot of teams and snatched a lot of good things. The red-clothed young man snorted. The yellow-clothed young man said indifferently, "They are the number one sect under the Immortal Palace. It's not surprising that they are so arrogant." Chapter 8:17. Heartless Palace. The number one force under the Palace of Immortals? Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept over the two people in front of him. He had a feeling that their conversation was purposely directed at him, but he had no idea what they were talking about. Coincidentally, Huang Xiaolong's gaze met with the yellow-clothed young man. The latter nodded with a faint smile, expressing his goodwill. "This father doesn't know you. What are you smiling for?" Yu Qianqiu turned around coldly, continuing to stare at the depression below. The yellow-clothed young man smiled nonchalantly. "This woman is really stubborn. She would rather die than comply. I'm afraid Che Mingqian is gnashing his teeth in anger right now." "Stubborn?" The red-clothed young man snorted disdainfully. "In the end, only death awaits you. Che Mingqian won't let this matter rest." The Che Mingqian they were talking about was the leader of the group of blue-clothed men, the one who had threatened Shui Mingqing in the valley. At this time, Che Mingqian was gnashing his teeth in anger. He didn't expect to run into two people like this who would rather die together than hand over the treasure in their hands. Yu Qianchou's gaze fell onto the fist-sized golden object in Mu Tianjiao's hand. Recalling the records in the treasure encyclopedia, he immediately remembered what it was. This object was called golden fulling, and according to the encyclopedia's records, it was a treasure that could increase the success rate of alchemy, greatly reducing the chance of a failed pill. Many people would add a certain amount of this when refining top-grade immortal pills. This was because the loss would be rather shocking if a defective pill appeared in a top-grade immortal pill. Golden fulling's market price was not calculated by the piece, but by the tael. Generally, one tael was worth 100 million divine-grade spirit stones. The golden fulling in Mu Tianjiao's hand was at least 4 to 5 taels. In other words, it was worth 4 to 500 million divine-grade spirit stones. You better persuade her, my patience has a limit. The earlier you hand it over, I'll let you off. If you're too late, none of you will leave this place alive. Che Mingqian sneered. Of the 20 or so people hired by the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, only 13 were left after several battles. Everyone naturally knew how powerful the Heartless Palace was, and they were no match for them at all. Terrified, they all looked at Mu Tianjiao. Mu Tianjiao's beautiful hair was disheveled as she looked at everyone with a miserable expression. She smiled bitterly and said, "Don't believe his nonsense. As long as the item is still in my hands, they won't dare to do anything to us. I, Mu Tianjiao, guarantee once again that if they dare to harm any one of us, I will immediately turn this gold fulling into powder, and no one will be able to obtain it." At this time, Tao Zhong, who was guarding Mu Tianjiao, also loudly warned everyone, "Don't believe his nonsense. Even if we hand over the item, he won't let us go. As long as we still have the item, we have a chance to live." Mu Tianjiao immediately gave him a grateful look. They hadn't found anything valuable along the way and had even lost a few men. This piece of golden fulling was discovered by chance under the roots of a tree. It was also the most valuable item they had so far. As long as they brought it back, the Four Links Chamber of Commerce would be able to hold on. With her personality, how could she give up this opportunity so easily? Che Mingqian sneered and said, "Stubborn dead duck. I'll give you one last chance. If you miss it, only death awaits you." What a big tone. I want to see who will be the one to die. A cold snort echoed in the surroundings as a figure appeared in the concave in an instant. When Mu Tianjiao and the others saw who it was, they exclaimed in unison, "Yu Qianchou." They all suspected that Yu Qianchou was already dead after running around alone. They didn't expect to see him again at this critical moment. Yu Qianchou's cold eyes looked at Che Mingqian and the others. Che Mingqian turned pale with fright and said, "It's you." More than a dozen men in blue subconsciously moved 10 meters away. The reaction of Che Mingqian and the others made the yellow-clothed man and red-clothed man look at each other in surprise. The surrounding people also looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know who this person was to make the disciples of Heartless Palace so afraid. Che Mingqian said angrily, "Who are you? Why do you keep going against my Heartless Palace? Do you really think my Heartless Palace is easy to bully?" If there was no one around, he would have called his fellow disciples and run away. However, under the watchful eyes of so many people, the Passionless Palace couldn't lose face as the #1 sect in the immortal world. What a joke. I'm not that bored. Yu Qianchou said indifferently, "Four Links Chamber of Commerce is my employer. You snatch things from me. Who do you think is going against who? I didn't expect Heartless Palace to be so arrogant to the point of lying." As he spoke, his aura had already locked onto the disciples of Heartless Palace. Only now did Che Mingqian realize that Mu Tianjiao and the others had cried out the name Yu Qianchou. Clearly, as the other party said, they were indeed in cahoots. Che Mingqian was speechless. Why was he so unlucky? He suddenly felt an aura locking onto him. This was clearly a sign of a fight. What was the difference between talking nonsense and seeking death? Without turning his head, he shouted, "Go!" The group of Heartless Palace disciples had just teleported away when they saw Yu Qianchou snort coldly, trying to run. He opened his arms at the same time, and the surrounding air suddenly exploded with a dozen balls of white smoke. Dense streams of light flashed out of Yu Qianchou's sleeves and quickly drilled into a dozen or so clouds of white smoke. After flashing for a while, they quickly returned and drilled back into his sleeves. The air was filled with smoke and the dozen storage bags fell to the ground with a thud. Yu Qianchou said indifferently to the people of Four Links Chamber of Commerce who were dumbfounded, No wonder Heartless Palace specializes in robberies. It's easy to get things. I think it's worth learning from them. With that said, he raised his hand and took the scattered storage bags into his hand, then put them away. The sounds of fighting could still be heard faintly in the distance, but this part of the world seemed abnormally quiet. Shock was written all over the faces of the people on the surrounding hillsides. Killing more than a dozen soul formation cultivators in an instant while teleporting away was definitely not something an immortal expert with a lower cultivation base could do. The people of Four Links Chamber of Commerce looked at Yu Qianzhou speechlessly, especially Mu Tianjiao. She now deeply suspected that Yu Qianzhou was not a soul formation cultivator at all. Such a miraculous method was definitely an immortal cultivator, and he must have used some sort of method to sneak in. After Mu Tianjiao recovered from her daze, joy surged in her eyes. With the help of such an expert, she would definitely be able to get what she wanted on this trip to the Divine Ruin Realm. She hurriedly bowed and said, "Thank you." As for whether Yu Qianzhou handed over the things he obtained, it was no longer important. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said with a smile, "You are my employer, this is my duty." As he spoke, his cold gaze swept across the surrounding spectators, full of warning. Immediately, many people quietly led their teams and left, knowing that this was no longer something they could do. However, they all secretly remembered the name Yu Qianzhou in their hearts. There were still two teams that had not left. The yellow-clothed man and the red-clothed man on the hillside looked at each other, nodded slightly and floated over together. Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes and looked over. The red-clothed man cupped his fists and said, "I am a disciple of Mythical Fire Palace Hui Yunlong. I am a disciple of Spirit Cultivation Sect, Du Feng." The yellow-clothed man cupped his fists, glanced at Mu Tianjiao and the others and said with a smile, "Other than their own people, the Immortal Palace will definitely not let an immortal expert in. Since you were able to enter the Divine Ruin Realm, your cultivation base must not have reached the Immortal Realm, but your ability is indeed admirable." Yu Qianzhou glanced at Tao Zhong and asked telepathically, "What kind of sects are the Mythical Fire Palace and Spirit Cultivation Sect?" Tao Zhong was speechless. He really could not imagine how such a capable person did not even know the most basic common sense. However, he did not dare to be disrespectful and immediately replied telepathically, "The immortal world has the top 50 large sects as well as the top 50 rich families or merchant associations. The Mythical Fire Palace and Spirit Cultivation Sect are both within the top 50 large sections. Although they are not comparable to the Heartless Palace, they are very powerful." Yu Qianzhou replied with an "Oh," and said, "I am Yu Qianzhou, what can I do for the two of you?" As he spoke, he could not help but look at Hui Yunlong. This was called not noticing, but once he paid attention he would be shocked. He discovered that this guy had a head of red hair, especially his appearance and burly figure. He was simply printed from the same mold as the Nanming old ancestor. The only difference was that one had a beard and was a little older. If the two of them were placed together, people would definitely mistake them for father and son. If the spirit-severing experts from the various countries saw this later, who knew what their reaction would be? Du Feng smiled faintly and said, "The Heartless Palace is a vengeful sect. Of course, with Brother Yu's ability, there is naturally no need to be afraid of the disciples of the Heartless Palace in the Divine Ruin Realm. I wonder which famous family Brother Yu comes from? Why have I never seen Brother Yu before?" The hidden meaning in these words was very obvious. It was to tell Yu Qianzhou that the news of him slaughtering the disciples of the Heartless Palace would inevitably spread. As long as the news spread without the protection of a famous family, the people of the Heartless Palace would definitely deal with him. "I am just an unknown wandering cultivator. How would I be related to any famous family? It is normal that you have not seen me before," Yu Qianzhou said. Hui Yunlong and Du Feng looked at each other and a strange look flashed in their eyes. Du Feng smiled and said, "There are many heroes in the wilderness. Brother Yu, there is no need to belittle yourself. Moreover, how many of the founders of famous families are not wandering cultivators? Let's take the 12 great immortal monarchs in the celestial world for example. There should be 13 great immortal monarchs now. Which one of them isn't a wandering cultivator? That is why it is said that there are crouching tigers and hidden dragons among the wandering cultivators. There are often some wandering cultivators who amaze the world with a single brilliant feat." 13 great immortal monarchs? Yu Qianzhou frowned and muttered with a puzzled expression. "Brother, you might not know this, but there are currently not many people who know this news. Du Feng smiled and explained, after the battle with the myriad swords demon lord, because a few immortal monarchs had fallen, a few immortal monarchs became vacant. Later on, the celestial emperor promoted a few powerful figures from the celestial world to fill the 12 immortal monarchs. Who knew that after all these years, immortal monarch Ji Wu, whom everyone thought had fallen, would return from the human world. However, it was not good to dismiss the other immortal monarchs, so there were the 13 great immortal monarchs now. Chapter 8:18. His explanation was within Yu Qianqiu's expectations, but he had misunderstood Yu Qianqiu's meaning. Yu Qianqiu asked himself, why not the 14 immortal monarchs? Since the silver ball given to immortal monarch crocodile was already in the immortal world, then immortal monarch crocodile must have also returned to the immortal world. I heard that immortal monarch crocodile came back with immortal monarch Wuji? Did I hear wrongly? Yu Qianqiu slowly asked without batting an eyelid. Hui Yunlong and Du Feng looked at each other in surprise. They did not expect an itinerant cultivator to know such a secret. Tao Zhong's eyes flickered. He was even more certain that Yu Qianqiu was a rich second generation. Otherwise, how could an ordinary person hear such high-level news? Du Feng sighed. Immortal monarch crocodile was one of the top figures in the immortal world back then. Who knew that after he came back with immortal monarch Wuji, his cultivation level had fallen to the exalted immortal late stage by the myriad swords demon lord. With his current cultivation level, he is no longer qualified to be an immortal monarch. If not for immortal monarch Wuji's protection, he would have lost his life this time. Oh! Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed and his heart surged. However, he still wore a doubtful expression and asked, no matter what, he was one of the 12 great immortal monarchs back then. Could it be that someone wants to kill him? Du Feng looked at Hui Yunlong. The latter paused, then said slowly, the immortal monarch that the immortal emperor promoted was his old enemy. Not only did this enemy occupy immortal monarch crocodile's immortal crocodile palace, but he also slaughtered immortal monarch crocodile's trusted aides. I heard that because of this, immortal monarch crocodile could not hold back his anger and spoke rudely in the palace. He talked back to the immortal emperor on the spot and was seriously injured. If not for immortal monarch Wuji's protection, I'm afraid immortal monarch crocodile would have lost his life. Yu Qianqiu nodded slowly, his expression slightly solemn. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Old monster, you yourself once said that there's no place for you in the immortal world. Why are you asking for trouble? However, he could understand immortal Lord Crocodile's feelings. Immortal Lord Crocodile had spent so much effort to return to the celestial world because he was confident. Perhaps he wanted to find his trusted subordinates and make a comeback. Who knew that when he returned he would find that everything had changed. Not only had his trusted subordinates been killed by his enemies, but even his territory had been occupied by them. The most unbearable thing was that all of this was tacitly allowed by the immortal emperor that he was loyal to all those years ago. This was tantamount to breaking his last trace of hope, so how could he swallow this? It was understandable that he was impulsive. The level of the conversation between the three was too high, so Mu Tianjiao and the others had no right to interrupt. They could only listen quietly from the side. Besides, this kind of high-level grudge was not something they could usually hear. In that case, immortal Lord Crocodile, who was severely injured by the immortal emperor, has been taken away by immortal Lord Wuji? Yu Qianqiu asked again. It should be. Hui Yunlong nodded. Du Feng's eyebrows twitched slightly. He found that Yu Qianqiu seemed to be very concerned about immortal Lord Crocodile. He could not help but ask, Brother Yu, do you know immortal Lord Crocodile? Yu Qianqiu was startled. He said in surprise, how could I know him? I'm just a little impressed. It's the first time I've heard of someone daring to talk back to an immortal emperor. If there's a chance, I'd like to meet this audacious immortal Lord Crocodile. By the way, where is immortal Lord Wuji who took away immortal Lord Crocodile? Du Feng smiled. Actually, immortal Lord Wuji's original immortal palace has also been occupied by another immortal lord. Logically speaking, there has never been a 13th immortal lord in the celestial world since ancient times. Even if immortal Lord Wuji returns from the human world, it is unlikely that he will become an immortal lord again. But immortal Lord Wuji is a little special. At this point he stopped, but the smile on his face was somewhat ambiguous. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, Immortal Lord Wuji is a little special? What's so special about her? Du Feng shook his head with a smile and said nothing more. Hui Yunlong, on the other hand, snorted. What can't be said? It's something that everyone knows. The celestial world is divided into 13 celestial prefectures. Other than the one that the Immortal Emperor presides over, the other 12 celestial prefectures are ruled by 12 immortal lords. Now there's a 13th immortal lord. Where are we going to divide the territory for Jiwu? Everyone knows that the Immortal Emperor once pursued Jiwu and wanted to make Jiwu the Immortal Empress, but Jiwu refused. If it weren't for this relationship, the Immortal Emperor wouldn't have shown mercy and let Jiwu save Immortal Lord Crocodile. Damn. What big gossip. Yu Qiancho's eyes lit up. The Immortal Emperor likes Jiwu? When he remembered that he had touched the Immortal Emperor's woman, this feeling... Du Feng smiled bitterly and looked at Hui Yunlong as if he was blaming him for speaking out of turn. Mu Tianjiao and the others were dumbfounded. No one knows whether he likes Jiwu or not, but there's definitely something going on. Hui Yunlong chuckled. This time there's a 13th immortal lord. Some people have already guessed that the Immortal Emperor wants to rule the same celestial prefecture as Jiwu. I believe that it won't be long before the matter of the Immortal Empress is brought up again. In fact, Immortal Lord Jiwu herself is well aware of this and has already rejected the appointment of another Immortal Lord. But the Immortal Emperor insists, and Immortal Lord Jiwu doesn't dare to offend the Immortal Emperor too much. Otherwise, no matter how big the celestial world is, there's no place for her to stand. Du Feng couldn't bear it anymore. He stopped him in a low voice. Hui Yunlong, these are all your guesses. Which eye of yours saw it? Be careful. Hui Yunlong said disdainfully. All the major sects and noble families have people in the Celestial Palace. Many people have seen this and I'm not the only one talking about it. Besides, no one has any disrespect for the Immortal Emperor. They're just exclaiming about Immortal Lord Jiwu's charm. Brother, you don't listen to his nonsense. Du Feng changed the topic and smiled. I advise Brother Yu to give up on the idea of meeting Immortal Lord Crocodile. Although he's down and out now, he has Immortal Lord Jiwu's protection. He's not someone people like us can meet. Yu Qiancho also knew that if he continued to talk about Immortal Lord Crocodile, it would really arouse suspicion. He changed the topic and asked, the two of you must have an extraordinary status in the mythical Fire Palace and the Spirit Cultivation sect, right? As he spoke, there was a slight smile on his face as he glanced at the two groups of people standing on the hillside in an orderly manner. These people were completely different from the groups of people from the other sections. These two groups of people seemed to be the subordinates of Du Feng and Hui Yunlong. Without receiving orders, they did not dare to move. Clearly, they did not have the kind of relationship that disciples from the same sect would have. Without a doubt, these two people had extraordinary statuses. Du Feng shook his head and smiled bitterly. Our status is a little bit different. Both of us are blood relatives of our respective sect leaders. The sect leader is our ancestor. But you also know that there are countless blood relatives like us in the various sects, so there's really nothing strange about it. Yu Qiancho softly said, oh. He could understand this. The immortal world was different from the human world. If there were no accidents, the old guys in the immortal world would be old men who wouldn't die. After countless years, they would probably have countless children and grandchildren. However, he couldn't help but look at the two teams of people on the hillside. He had a feeling that things weren't as simple as Du Feng said. Du Feng clearly saw through his doubts, so he waved his hand and said, Brother Yu, please don't misunderstand. Our fathers just happen to hold some positions in their respective sects, and these people are all disciples under our fathers. Brother Yu will naturally understand the reason when you have the chance in the future. Yu Qiancho looked at the two of them and said with a smile, it can't be that the two of you are looking for me just to chat about family matters, right? Du Feng looked at Hui Yunlong and said with a hearty smile, the disciples of all the major sects in the ruins of God have gathered here. It has already become a place of trouble. Brother Yunlong and I were afraid that it wouldn't be safe, so we joined forces. I believe that there are many sects that are doing the same thing as us. As he said that, he swept his gaze across the people from the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. He stared at Yu Qiancho and asked, I wonder if the Four Links Chamber of Commerce is interested in joining forces with us to search for treasures? The treasures obtained will be divided equally among the three sections. What does Brother Yu think? I'm only being hired by the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. I can't make the decision on this matter. I'm afraid. Yu Qianchou stared at Mu Tianjiao. Before he could finish speaking, Mu Tianjiao took a step forward and bowed to him, saying, Mr. Yu, please make the decision. Mu Tianjiao will listen to Mr.'s instructions. She could be considered a smart person. She naturally knew that the reason why large sects like the mythical Flame Palace and the Spirit Cultivation sect were willing to take the initiative to cooperate was definitely not because of her Four Links Chamber of Commerce. A small chamber of commerce like the Four Links Chamber of Commerce would probably not even be willing to look them in the eye. Furthermore, they wanted to give a huge benefit to the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. It was nothing more than giving face to Yu Qianchou. She naturally had to tactfully take the initiative to give up her authority. As long as she could tie down Yu Qianchou, many problems would no longer be a problem. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong glanced at Mu Tianjiao and smiled at each other. They discovered that this woman was really a smart person. Yu Qianchou stared at Mu Tianjiao and fell into a short silence. To be honest, he rather admired this woman and did not wish for anything to happen to her in this dangerous place. Besides, he also wanted to make friends with two large sections. After all, he was too unfamiliar with the immortal world and needed a starting point. He paused and said, Since that's the case, I'll make the decision on behalf of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. I hope that the mythical Flame Palace and the Spirit Cultivation sect will take good care of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. Haha. Brother Yu is indeed a straightforward person. Hui Yunlong laughed. Du Feng also laughed and said, Since it's a cooperation, everyone naturally has to take care of each other. Yu Qianchou also followed the two of them and politely said. He understood in his heart that these two fellows would definitely not stick to him for no reason. They definitely had a purpose, but he did not point it out. He wanted to see what exactly these two fellows were plotting. After the three parties exchanged pleasantries, under Yu Qianchou's decision, the three teams of people continued to head deeper into the Divine Ruin realm. Mu Tianjiao, who had increased her confidence, happily led her people to take the lead. Tao Zhong and the others who were hired also heaved a sigh of relief. Now that they had joined forces with the people from the two great sects, the risk of danger for everyone would be greatly reduced. Furthermore, there was an expert like Yu Qianchou holding the line.